Hello everyone, and welcome back. Out here on the loneliest roads in the world, truckers carry more than cargo. We carry nights we don't talk about, moments that stayed with us long after the engine cooled, moments that changed the way we look at the dark. If you're here, it means you're ready to ride with us again. Down the highways where radios go silent, headlights catch things that shouldn't be there, and every mile has its own secret. Before we roll into tonight's story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another true trucker nightmare. And when it's over, drop a comment and tell me what you think really happened out there. Alright, let's shift into the dark. They tell you every route has a story, but Coyote Jaw has teeth. Name's Ray, 30 years on the road, most of it running nights through the Southwest. I don't scare easy, and I don't drink on a haul. What I'm about to tell you happened stone cold sober, in a truck I knew better than my own house, on a bridge I'd crossed a dozen times without thinking. This time was different. I was pulling a 53-foot dry van, loaded with palletized electronics, headed west toward a distribution hub outside Barstow. It was a little after 2 a.m., that empty hour where the world feels like it's holding its breath. The sky over the desert was clear, but the stars looked dim, like somebody turned the brightness down. No moon, just that faint glow on the horizon where the highway bled into nothing. The Coyote Jaw Canyon route is a shortcut if you're trying to make up time. 2-lane blacktop, no shoulder worth mentioning, guardrails that look like they were welded during the Cold War. The old suspension bridge in the middle is the worst part. Rusted cables, wood and steel decking, and a drop so deep you never see the bottom, even in daylight. Dispatch had me on a tight schedule. I'd already lost an hour fighting wind outside Gallup, so I chose the canyon. I'd done it before. I knew the turns, the mile markers, the little abandoned gas station with the half-lit sign that always flickers like a dying heartbeat. The cab was warm from the heater, smelling like stale coffee and diesel, and the faint citrus of the dashboard wipes my wife insists I use. The hum of the engine was steady, that deep, living vibration through the wheel and floor. On the CB, it was mostly dead, just the occasional hiss of static, and once, a far-off voice I couldn't quite catch. Sounded like someone whispering through a tunnel. I chalked it up to skip, radio waves bouncing off the atmosphere. Happens sometimes at night. When I turned off the main highway and onto the canyon road, I felt it, that subtle shift in atmosphere. Headlights only showed maybe 50 yards ahead, the rest swallowed by rock and shadow. The temperature dropped a couple degrees, enough to fog the corners of the windshield for a second. I flicked the defrost on, tapped the wheel, told myself I was just tired. The first sign something was off was the mile marker. There's a battered green post marked 12, about 10 minutes before the bridge. It leans a little, always has, and someone once put a sticker of a coyote on it. I remember that because I noticed it years ago and thought it was cute. I passed mile 12. Saw the leaning post, saw the coyote sticker glint in my high beams. Then, maybe 3 minutes later, I passed mile 12 again. Same lean, same sticker, same little chip of missing paint on the bottom right corner. I actually laughed out loud. "Come on," I said to nobody. Road crew screwing with the markers again. I checked the odometer. I'd definitely gone more than a few tenths. The GPS on the dash showed my little blue arrow moving steadily west. No sign of looping. I told myself there must have been 2 markers, one old, one new. That happens. But the humor didn't stick. Something small and cold crawled up the back of my neck and settled there. By the time the canyon wall started to close in, my hands had that tight feeling on the wheel. Not panic, just bracing for something I couldn't name. The CB crackled. 27, you there, Ray? The voice was buried in static, riding the noise like it didn't belong to the same transmission. I leaned toward the mic. "This is Ray." "Say again." Nothing. Just the soft roar of snow-like static in my speakers. Then it went dead quiet in that way electronics sometimes do. Not off, just holding back. The canyon narrowed. The guardrails appeared warped and dented. Ahead, the bridge lights glowed faint and yellow, hovering in the darkness like a string of tired eyes. The old suspension bridge over Coyote Jaw Canyon. I've never liked that bridge. It's not just the age. It's the way the engine sound changes when you're on it. Normally concrete and asphalt give you a certain tone, a rhythm you learn to tune out. The bridge gives you this hollow, metallic echo that makes your steering wheel feel less connected to the earth. Tonight, as I rolled closer, the air in the cab grew heavier. Not colder exactly, just thick like breathing through wool. I could smell the desert outside. Dust, dry rock, the faint mineral tang of old rain. Under that, a sharp, metallic scent, like ozone after lightning, even though the sky was clear. I downshifted as I reached the edge of the bridge. The tires hit the first section of planking and steel with a soft thud. Then the familiar hollow vibration. That's when I heard it. Something hit the underside of the bridge. Not water, not wind. A solid, meaty impact like a huge object slamming against the metal ribs from below. It came up through the floor, a deep boom that rattled the coffee in my cup holder. I froze, foot hovering between accelerator and brake. Another impact, more to the rear this time, directly under the trailer axles. The truck shivered. The sound lingered, not just in my ears but in the frame of the cab, like someone raking an iron bar along the bones of the bridge. I told myself it was crosswind, maybe a gust hitting the structure. Maybe there was something hanging under there, a piece of loose metal banging around. Then it started pacing me. As I eased forward, whatever was under the bridge matched my speed. I didn't hear a series of hits. I heard a continuous scrape, like something with weight and intent was moving along the underside, tracking the movement of my tires. Whenever I sped up a little, the sound shifted forward. When I let off the gas, it lagged, then caught up. I felt it in the steering column, a faint shudder that had nothing to do with the road. Halfway across, the bridge began to vibrate. At first I thought it was my imagination, a trick of focus. But the screws on the steering column, the ones I'd tightened myself a week prior, started buzzing. A metal pen in the cup holder danced. The rearview mirror trembled enough to blur the reflection of the trailer. The CB hissed again. A voice, clearer this time, seeped through. "You shouldn't be here." Just that. For words, low and flat, like someone talking through a mouth full of gravel. I grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" Silence. Then another deep concussion from below, strong enough that I felt the trailer lift. Just an inch, maybe less, but enough for my stomach to drop like I'd crested a roller coaster. For a split second, the weight of 40,000 pounds behind me didn't feel like it was on the bridge anymore. It felt like something had picked it up and was testing the balance. The bridge lights flickered. The whole row of yellow bulbs along the cables dimmed, then surged, then flickered again like they were underwater. That's when I saw the shadow. It moved under me, visible through the gaps between planks where the road deck didn't quite meet clean. I only caught it because my headlights bounced off something beneath, reflecting up in strange angles. Too big to be any animal. Too long. It stretched from one side of the bridge to the other, broad and flat, then suddenly segmented, like a dozen limbs unfolding and dragging along the underside. When the lights above flashed, I saw impressions of shape. Not fur, not scales, just smooth, dark mass clinging to metal. I pressed the accelerator. The engine roared, but the truck didn't respond with its usual eagerness. It was like pulling against a heavy headwind that wasn't there. The scrape beneath intensified, a shrieking, grinding sound that set my teeth on edge. Every instinct I had screamed not to stop. Don't brake, don't look back, just get off the bridge. The CB clicked all on its own. The speaker popped, then a whisper came through, so close it sounded like it was in the passenger seat with me. Almost there. The bridge deck bucked. Not enough to throw me, but enough to jolt me in my seat. My hands were slick on the wheel. I could feel goosebumps crawling up my arms under my flannel, even though the heater was still on. The air smelled like burnt rubber and hot metal, like brake pads after a runaway ramp, but my temperature gauge was normal. Somewhere under my feet, something dragged its claws. That's what they felt like, along the undercarriage. The sound was high and metallic, screaming up through the frame. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the resistance vanished. The asphalt returned under my wheels with a soft, blessed change in tone. The vibration leveled out. The bridge lights disappeared behind me. The cab felt lighter, like somebody had taken a weight off the roof. I didn't slow down until I'd put a good mile between me and that canyon. When I finally pulled over onto a straight stretch with a half-decent shoulder, my hands were shaking so bad I had to set them in my lap. The night was dead quiet. No wind, no crickets, just the ticking of hot metal cooling. The sky above was normal again, stars brighter, like someone had turned the universe back on. I climbed out with my flashlight, boots crunching gravel, heart pounding louder than the engine idle. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I'd find nothing, that it was all in my head. I walked along the trailer, light beam cutting across the white panels, the tires, the steel frame. When I got to the rear axles, I saw the marks. Deep gouges along the metal undercarriage, running in long, parallel lines. 4 at a time, then 5, then 4 again. Each groove was clean and sharp, like something harder than steel had raked upward, trying to peel the trailer off the bridge from below. No rocks on the road could have done that. No loose chains. No debris. Hand shaking, I ran my fingers along one of the grooves. The edge was rough, still warm, like it had been carved seconds ago, not minutes. I checked again in the morning at the yard under full daylight. The mechanics saw them too. One of them whistled low and said, "What the hell did you hit, man? A dinosaur?" I just shrugged. I didn't have an answer that didn't make me sound insane. Dispatch logged the incident as road anomaly. I never told them about the voice on the CB, or the way the trailer lifted, or the shadow that moved with my wheels. You start talking like that in this job, people stop giving you night runs. They assume you're tired or using or cracking up. But here's the thing. I still run the Southwest. Still pull electronics. Still drive nights. I've crossed a lot of bridges since then. I've never taken Coyote Jaw again. Because every time the CB goes quiet, every time I feel the road hum change under my tires as I roll over steel and concrete, I hear that scrape in my bones and feel that weightlessness in my gut. And somewhere, under some old, rusted span in the dark, I know there's something that remembers the taste of my trailer and is just waiting for me to cross the wrong bridge again. They call it Blue Serpent Canyon for a reason. On a map, it just looks like any other stretch of desert road. But if you've run it as long as I have, you know the curves. They coil and unwind in a pattern your body memorizes, even if your brain stops paying attention. After 20 years, my hands can take that canyon half asleep and still hit every bend like clockwork. At least that's what I thought, until the night the canyon decided it was done playing by the map. Name's Cole. I pull mostly long haul out west, running a 389 Pete with a 53-foot reefer on the back. Groceries, meds, whatever fits on a pallet and needs to be somewhere yesterday. That night, I was hauling frozen food out of Phoenix, headed north to a distribution center past Flagstaff. I've taken Blue Serpent more times than I can count. It's a quiet, lonely cut through rock that saves you time if you respect it. It was just after 1:30 a.m., that dead zone where even the late-night stations start playing slow songs. Sky was clear, but the stars looked muted, like someone had put a dirty film over the whole dome. My headlights carved out a tunnel of pale light ahead, the rest of the world swallowed in black. The cab smelled like coffee dregs, diesel, and a faint metallic tang from the air vents. Engine hummed steady under my feet, a low vibration I've always found comforting. On the CB, there was nothing but the occasional snap of static, like someone lighting matches in another room. Dispatch had me on a tight window. I wasn't speeding, but I wasn't taking my time either. You learn the balance. Push just enough to make the drop, not enough to make the news. I hit the approach to Blue Serpent a little before 2 a.m. There's a marker there. A big, jagged rock that leans over the highway like a tooth, spray-painted decades ago with a sloppy blue snake. Some local kid's idea of a joke. I always check my clock when I pass it, more out of habit than anything. 2:02, I muttered, tapping the steering wheel. Right on time. The canyon mouth swallowed me up. The temperature dropped a couple degrees the second I passed between the first two walls of rock. The inside of the windshield filmed over for a heartbeat, then cleared as the defrost kicked in. The engine note changed too, the sound bouncing tighter, like I'd pulled the world closer around me. For the first few minutes, everything was normal. Left bend with the faded guardrail. Right bend with the graffiti rock that says some kid's name and a date from the 90s. Short straight where you can see the sky again. Then a long, easy right that curves around a rock face that always reminds me of a sleeping dog. I didn't even have to think about it. Then I hit a bend that shouldn't have been there. It was subtle at first. I was expecting a straight. My spine knew it, my hands knew it. Instead, the road tipped slightly to the left, just enough that I had to correct. Only a few degrees, but I felt it in my shoulders. I frowned and checked the GPS. The little blue arrow was drifting ahead like normal, but the road on the screen didn't match what I was seeing. My headlights were following a curve, but the display showed a straight section. I chalked it up to bad mapping. Happens, especially out here where updates come slow. Then the CB popped. "Ol? You copy?" Sounded like my name, buried in static. I grabbed the mic. "Say again?" "This is Cole on northbound, in the Serpent." The only answer was a long, low wash of white noise that ended in a sound I couldn't quite place. Like breath exhaled over a microphone, but deeper, stretched, wrong. Then the channel went dead. I shook my head, took a sip of cold coffee, and forced a laugh. "Skip's wild tonight," I said to the empty passenger seat, but something in my gut had gone tight. Another curve appeared where there should have been a straight. This one was sharper, hugging the rock so close I could see little fractures and veins in the stone as my headlights slid over it. I slowed a bit, more out of instinct than fear. "Road work," I told myself. "They must have rerouted a lane, cut a new line through here. I just missed the memo." Except there were no cones, no fresh pavement, no reflector posts knocked out of place. The asphalt looked old, worn in the way only years of heat and tires can do. I kept driving. Landmarks started to go missing. The graffiti rock with the kid's name? Gone. In its place, an unmarked wall of stone, pitted and clean. The little runoff area with the rusted-out sedan that's been sitting nose down for as long as I can remember? The patch of dirt was there, but the car was not. No tire tracks, no scars where it had once been. Just untouched gravel and scrub. My GPS stopped just being wrong and started spinning. The map rotated slowly under the arrow, then faster, like the world was turning around me instead of the other way around. The device beeped and tried to recalculate, only to spit the same road name back at me with a different distance every time. I reached up to smack it, then stopped. My hand hovered in midair. Outside, the canyon walls were drawing closer. I'm not speaking in metaphors. They were physically closer than they should have been, crowding the lane like someone had grabbed both sides of the rock and pressed inward. My high beams hit stone on both sides, tight enough that if I stuck my arm straight out the window, I swear I could have touched both walls with my fingertips. My truck is standard width. The canyon has never been a squeeze. Now, my mirrors felt like they were inches from scraping. The engine's vibration changed. It didn't sound wrong exactly, but it felt less connected to the road. Like the tires weren't fully engaged. Every bump felt delayed, like the feedback had to travel through something else before it reached me. My skin prickled under my jacket. Goosebumps climbed my arms despite the warm air blowing from the vents. The cab smelled different too. Less coffee, more something else. Rain on hot rock. The faint electric tang of ozone. The cold, metallic scent you get near transformers right before a storm breaks. I cracked the window just to check. Cold air knifed in, too cold for a clear desert night. It smelled like wet stone and hot brakes, but I was riding the pedal gentle, nowhere near enough to cook anything. I rolled the window back up. The CB clicked again. This time, there was no question it was my own voice. "In the Serpent," it said, my tone, my cadence. But the words dragged out like they'd been recorded and played back on a dying tape. "In the Serpent." Then, under that, another voice layered in. Low, almost too low to hear. "Not your canyon tonight." I dropped the mic. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the engine and my own breathing. The canyon tightened even more. My headlights washed over the rock directly ahead and caught something that made my mouth go dry. About 6 feet off the ground, Etched into the stone itself was a skid mark. Not a scrape from falling rock. Not a water stain. A black, rubber skid mark spiraling upward, like a tire had lost control and tried to climb the wall. It twisted in an S shape, thick and dark and impossibly high, like someone had taken a highway accident and pasted it onto a vertical surface. My brain tried to explain it. Paint, prank, old drilling rig scuff, anything but what it looked like. But every mile of rubber I've ever burned told me exactly what I was seeing. Panic braking. Up the rock. I rolled past it slower than I should have, eyes flicking between the road and that insane mark. For a heartbeat, my headlights made the black streak shine, and I thought I saw impressions inside it, like treads but wrong. Too many lines, too close together. Then it slid out of sight behind me. I don't know how long I drove like that, half in a fog, half hyper-aware. Time stretched. The GPS gave up entirely and froze my blue arrow in place while the map spun uselessly. The canyon around me felt like a throat tightening, the air thick and heavy, compressing sound until even my engine seemed muffled. At some point, I realized I'd stopped seeing the sky. The road ahead was a tunnel of rock. My lights bounced off surfaces much closer than they should have been, catching odd angles, corners where there should be smooth curves, shadows that didn't line up with my beams, like the stone had started folding in ways rock shouldn't. I gripped the wheel harder. My fingers felt like they were buzzing, not from vibration, but from lack of it, like the truck wasn't quite on the pavement anymore. The CB hissed one last time. Left. My own voice whispered, "Don't follow them right." "There is no right," I muttered through my teeth. "There is no them either. It's just me." But when the next fork appeared, yes, a fork in a canyon that has never had one, I saw what that meant. The road split ahead, both lanes curving out in a looping shape that made my eyes hurt if I stared too long. The right side seemed to climb, just barely, like it was easing up onto the wall. My beams traced it and showed me a glimpse of something that made my stomach lurch. Other trucks. Not fully, just hints. Sleek silver sides, faded logos, taillights glowing a dull, bloody red far ahead. But they were at the wrong angle, tilted like they were riding a bank turn that went past 90 degrees. For a second, their lights swung overhead, upside down, like a convoy driving along the ceiling of the canyon. The left fork stayed level. Narrow, too narrow, but grounded. I took the left. The moment my cab committed, the right side seemed to slide away, like it hadn't really been there, just a reflection in warped glass. The rock pressed in one last time. My right mirror cleared the wall by what felt like a breath. Stone passed so close I could see tiny crystals glittering, catching my beams like wet eyes. Then, without transition, I was out. No gentle widening, no gradual change. 1 second, I was in a living throat of rock. The next, the canyon walls dropped away, and I was on open road under a wide, ordinary sky. Stars blinked sharp and clean overhead. The engine sounded normal again. The vibration ran true from the tires to the wheel. In my mirror, Blue Serpent Canyon sat behind me like it always had. Just a dark slash in the land. Nothing more. I didn't pull over right away. I drove another 15 miles before my nerves stopped screaming at me to keep moving. Finally, I swung into a little truck turnout, killed my speed, and let the air brakes sigh. My hands left damp prints on the wheel. Outside, the night smelled like it should. Desert dust, faint exhaust, cold dryness. No ozone, no metallic wet stone, just air. My first thought was that I'd nodded off. Microsleep, hallucination from fatigue. I'm not a rookie. I know what tired driving can do. It was the only explanation that didn't make me question my sanity. Then I remembered the dash cam. I run a dual setup, one forward, one on the cab facing the trailer. Always recording. Insurance loves it. Lawyers hate it. Right then, it felt like a lifeline. I pulled the SD card right there, hands still shaking, and fired up my laptop on the passenger seat. The glow of the screen turned the cab into a little floating bubble of pale light. I scrubbed through the last hour. First, it looked normal. The canyon entrance, the familiar bends. Then the footage started to drift off script. The same wrong curve, the missing landmarks, the skid mark climbing the rock. It was all there, crisp and clear, date and timestamp ticking along the bottom like any other night. But there was more. The camera didn't just show the road I remembered. It showed the road changing. Lines on the asphalt bending, then straightening. Reflectors shifting position between frames. A guardrail appearing for 3 seconds that I know doesn't exist anywhere on that run. And that fork, both paths visible, the right one curving up at an angle the camera tried to flatten but couldn't hide. I watched my own truck veer left while, on the right, ghostly shapes of other rigs drifted along an impossible incline. The GPS overlay on the video, my unit syncs the data, went insane. The route line nodded, looping over itself, drawing spirals in the canyon where no such roads exist on any map I've ever seen. I watched the whole thing twice. By the third time, my mouth had gone dry. I thought about sending a clip to dispatch. Thought about posting it in one of the trucking forums. But I could already hear the responses. Glitch. Fake. Edited. Lay off the pills, old man. Next day, on not enough sleep, I took Blue Serpent again. In daylight, everything was where it should be. Every curve, every rock, every stupid graffiti tag. Narrow in places, sure, but not like the night before. No fork. No impossible skid mark 6 feet up the wall. Just a road I'd driven for 20 years. I pulled over at the exact stretch where I'd seen that black spiral. Walked the shoulder, boots crunching gravel. Put my hand on the rock. Cold. Solid. Clean. No mark. Later, back home, I tried to show the footage to a buddy of mine. Popped the SD into the laptop, pulled up the file. Corrupted. The thumbnails were there, little frozen images of the canyon. But when I clicked play, all I got was static blocks and frozen frames. The timestamp jumped, skipped, then died. Audio was gone. Every other file on that card worked fine. Just that run was ruined. I backed up what I could. There's one frame that still opens clean on my phone if I don't touch it too long. It shows the canyon at night, my headlights catching a split in the road that shouldn't exist. If you zoom in, you can see faint smears of red lights far up on the right side, where no truck should ever be able to drive. Sometimes I stare at that picture longer than I should. I still run Blue Serpent. It's my route. It's how I pay my bills. In daylight, it's almost hard to believe anything strange ever happened there. But at night, when the stars dim and the CB goes silent and my GPS takes just a little too long to recalculate, I feel the canyon watching back. And every time I drop into that first curve, there's a split second where the wheel feels loose in my hands, like the road is thinking about rearranging itself again and deciding whether or not it wants to let me through. They tell you night convoys are safer. More eyes, more engines, more noise on the channel to keep you awake. That's what I believed for most of my 30 years on the road. Funny thing is, the only time I ever really felt alone out there was the night I was rolling with 2 other trucks through Iron Hook Canyon. Name's Mason. I run long haul out west, mostly reefer and dry van, depending on the season. That night I was in my usual ride, a battered but reliable Kenworth T680, hauling a full load of packaged meat out of Vegas, headed toward a hub near Salt Lake. Tight deadline, as always. Dispatch linked me up with 2 other drivers at a truck stop outside Henderson so we could run the dark stretch together. Good guys. Lead truck was a red Freightliner driven by a guy who called himself Ryder. Never got his real name. Second truck, slotting in between us, was a white Cascadia. The driver went by Lucky. Said he'd done that canyon 100 times. We synced our CBs to the same channel. Same frequency on the handhelds too. Swapped jokes over coffee while we checked our straps and tires. Felt normal, comfortable. I remember thinking, at least I won't be alone through Iron Hook this time. Iron Hook Canyon is a scar cut through rock and scrub. 2 lanes, no median, no lights, not much shoulder. The walls crowd close in places. During the day, it's just another piece of desert. At night, with no moon, it feels like you're driving through the inside of a dead throat. But that night, perfect visibility, calm air, stars overhead like salt scattered on velvet. No fog, no rain, no wind. If you had to pick a night to drive that canyon, this would have been it. We rolled out just after midnight. Ryder took the lead, his red taillights a steady twin glow up ahead. Lucky's truck sat between us, close enough that I could read the faded blue logo on the back of his trailer whenever my beams caught it just right. We kept formation tight, not reckless, just snug. Enough that if something went wrong, we'd all know about it in seconds. CB chatter was light but steady. Ryder telling stories about some dispatcher in Reno who used to fall asleep on the radio. Lucky complaining about truck stop food. I chimed in now and then, just to feel like part of the chain. The canyon entrance crept up on us, a dark bite taken out of the horizon. The road dipped, the rock rose on both sides, and the sound of the engines shifted as the canyon swallowed the noise. My truck's hum grew deeper, echoing back at me through the windows. As we passed the sign that read entering Ironhoop Canyon, next exit 22 miles, the cab temperature dropped a couple of degrees. I noticed because I keep the climate control steady, 68 always. The air coming through the vents suddenly felt a little too cold, with a faint metallic edge to it. I checked the gauge, still at 68. "Y'all feel that?" I asked into the mic. "Feel what?" Ryder said. His voice had that lazy confidence long-haul guys get after too many miles. "Feels like another paycheck to me." Lucky chuckled. "You just need coffee, Mason. You sounded half asleep back at the stop." I let it go. Maybe they didn't notice it. Maybe it was just me. We pushed deeper into the canyon, the rock forming high shoulders on either side. My headlights carved a pale tunnel through the dark. The rest of the world just shadow and suggestion. The stars dimmed above the rim, like someone turned the sky down a notch. Then something small, almost nothing, made my chest tighten. Ryder's taillights flickered. Just a little. A hiccup of red up ahead. Off on. Off on. Not like a brake tap. More like a candle flame fighting a breath of air. "You got a short, Ryder?" I asked. "Your tails are blinking at me." "Negative," he replied. "Everything's green on my end." "You okay back there?" Lucky cut in. "They look fine from here." I frowned. From where I was sitting, Ryder's lights seemed a shade too dim, like they were farther away than they should have been, even though we hadn't changed spacing. I dismissed it. Electrical glitch, angle of the road, my eyes playing tricks. 100 explanations. All better than something is wrong with reality. We kept rolling. The CB quieted down as we settled into the run. Just the occasional murmur, the static hum, the sound of 3 separate engines blending into a low, comforting roar. The canyon walls glided past, sometimes so close that the rock caught our reflections in brief, ghostly flashes. Then Ryder's lights flickered again. This time they didn't come back. One moment they were there, twin red dots marking the center of my world. The next they were gone, not fading into distance, not vanishing around a bend, just snuffed, like somebody pinched them between 2 fingers. "Ryder, you just kill your lights?" Lucky's voice came sharp and immediate. No answer. I eased off the throttle, heart knocking an extra beat. The engine's vibration shifted under my hands, turning from background noise to something I couldn't ignore. My headlights reached out and touched only the back of Lucky's trailer and naked black beyond, where Ryder should have been. "Ryder, this is Mason," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You still with us, man?" "Nothing. Just CB hiss." Lucky's truck wobbled a little, then straightened. I could almost feel him craning forward in his seat, searching for any sign of the lead truck. "Yeah, Lucky said slowly. "I lost visuals." "He's not. I got nothing up here." The canyon felt tighter. I can't explain that part cleanly. The road didn't suddenly narrow. The walls didn't jump closer. But the feeling of space collapsed. The darkness ahead wasn't just dark. It was empty, like our headlights were shining into a room that hadn't been built yet. "Maybe he took off around a bend," I offered. "Maybe he sped up." "Speed steady," Lucky muttered. "I'd see his shadow at least." I got nothing, man." He was there and then, his voice cut out. Not the CB cutting off. Not a clean click. His words just stopped mid-breath. Static swallowed the last syllable like a wave rolling over a whisper. "Lucky? Repeat that." I tapped the mic, You're breaking up. Silence. The CB light stayed green. Channel open. But there was no engine roar in the background. No seat creak. No cough. No swear. Just an eerie flatness, like the signal was connected to somewhere that had sound once and didn't anymore. That's when I saw the marks in the snow behind the truck. The other driver's trailer ended a few meters ahead of where mine stood. Behind his rear wheels, in the lane, the snow was disturbed. Not in the random, scruffed way of boots pacing around. It was a clear path. 2 parallel furrows, spaced about shoulder width apart, digging into the snow with alternating scuffs where heels had dragged. Drag marks, as if someone had been pulled on their back. The path started near the spot where the driver's door would swing open, cut across the lane behind the cab, and angled toward the outer edge of the road, the drop side. Whatever had done the pulling had been strong enough that the dragged weight had carved into the snow despite the wind. I walked slowly along the trail, my boots crunching beside it. The flashlight beam picked up details my headlights had washed out. The imprint of shoulders here, a handprint clawed in vain into the surface there, fingers having dug in and failed to hold. The wind tore at my jacket, flapped the edges against my legs. It crowded in around my ears, making it hard to hear my own footsteps. I told myself it could have been a rescue. Maybe the driver had collapsed. Maybe someone had pulled him toward the safer side and I was misreading the direction in the chaos of snow and shadow. Then I realized something simple. The trail went the wrong way. It headed toward the cliff, not the rock wall side. The drop. I followed it another few meters, stomach tight, eyes scanning ahead. The road here had no guardrail, just a low, broken edge of packed snow, and then nothing. The wind lifted spoonfuls of powder and threw them out into darkness. My light caught only emptiness beyond the edge. 2 meters from that drop, the drag marks stopped. Not faded, not scuffed out gradually. Stopped. One moment the snow was carved, compressed, showing the grooves of a body being hauled. The next, it was smooth and untouched, a fresh white sheet stretching all the way to the lip. No boot prints around. No tracks of another person. No claw marks where hands might have grabbed in desperation. Just an ending, like someone had lifted the weight clean into the air and erased the rest of the story. I stood there, the wind punching cold into my back, the beam of my flashlight trembling slightly on the blank snow. The silence under the screaming wind felt wrong, too complete. No distant scrape of rock, no rumble of another engine, no shout, only my own breathing and the faint vibration of 2 idling trucks behind me. I don't know how long I stared at that empty edge. A minute, 2. Then the mountain groaned. It started as a low vibration under my boots, not enough to throw me off balance. Just a subtle shiver, like something huge shifting in its sleep far beneath the road. The sound followed a moment later, rolling out of the dark peaks above with a depth that made my chest tighten. I'd heard small slides before, rockfalls, ice sloughing from high ledges. Those crack, crash, and then it's over. This was different. This was a long, drawn-out growl that rose and swelled until it felt like it was inside my bones. Not here. Not now. I whispered without meaning to. Adrenaline cut through whatever curiosity had held me there. I turned and ran, awkward in the snow, careful not to slip, back toward the trucks. The other driver's drag trail lay beside me, ending just as abruptly as before. The groan became a roar. I could feel it in the air now, the wind pattern changing, gusts pulling instead of pushing, like the valley was inhaling. I scrambled into my cab, slammed the door, and twisted the key even though the engine was already running. The familiar vibration under me steadied my nerves by a hair. The rearview mirror, useless in the dark behind, rattled. In the side mirror, I saw it begin. Not on top of me, behind me, a wall of white and rock, breaking free from a distant slope and rushing down, blotting out the starless sky above the road I'd just climbed. At first, it was just movement. A darker mass inside the night, growing, rolling, bringing its own dust and snow. Then my taillight glow caught the edge of it, turned it into a boiling wave. The avalanche didn't fall straight down. It surged, across the road, over it, through it, and onto the stretch I would have been on if that truck hadn't been parked sideways, forcing me to slow, to stop, to investigate. The sound hit the cab like a physical blow. Not a single crash, but a continuous, grinding roar. Stone on stone, snow packed into dense ice, air being crushed and shoved aside. The steering wheel shook in my hands. The cab rocked on the suspension as a wave of displaced air hit. I could only watch in the mirror as the section of road behind me vanished under a moving hill of debris. One moment it was narrow blacktop bordered by snowbanks. The next, it was a churning white and gray mass pouring over the drop, carrying chunks of rock that would have flattened a loaded rig like a toy. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the motion slowed. The roar dropped an octave, turned into a rumble, then into a series of distant cracks as the last of the material settled. The wind reasserted itself, rushing back in, carrying a cloud of powder that swirled around both trucks before blowing down the valley. I sat there, breathing hard, my heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My fingers ached from how tight I'd gripped the wheel. The engine idled calmly, indifferent. Behind us, nothing moved. The stretch of road I should have been on was buried. Any truck there would have been smashed, shoved, and thrown over the edge along with the debris. No chance. No story to tell. If that other truck hadn't been blocking half the road, I would have been 30-40 meters further along when the mountain let go. It had saved my life, but its own driver was gone. When the crews finally reached us hours later, first a patrol jeep, then a snowcat, then bigger machines, they found what I had. A running engine, a warm cab, half-eaten lunch, no driver. They traced the drag marks, measured them, took photos. They shook their heads the same way I had at the way the trail simply stopped. The cliff beneath was searched by lights and ropes. Nothing. No body in the rocks below. No coat snagged on an outcrop. No boot. They checked the driver's log. He'd checked in earlier from lower down the route. No distress calls on the CB. No phone call to dispatch. Just vanished. Some of the older road workers muttered about Kurbani, a sacrifice. One truck to block the way, one driver taken so another could live. Half joke, half something else. I don't know about that. I just know what I saw. A truck angled across the road like a hand held up in warning. The marks of a man pulled away from everything that could have saved him. And the mountain waiting for someone to be in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. Now, whenever I climb toward Batura at night and the wind begins to scream, I watch the road ahead differently. If I see hazards in the distance, if I see a rig sitting wrong on a blind bend, I don't just curse the delay. I wonder who parked it there, and what's walking in the snow around it that we never see. Something that chooses which one of us is the last truck before the avalanche. Would you like me to generate more stories like this one? They call it Salt Vale for a reason. On the map, it's just another cut through the desert, a canyon the highway threads like a sewing needle. But you run it long enough, you learn how it sounds, how it breathes. Windstorms are the worst of it. Gusts that slam into the side of your trailer, sand blasting the paint, dust devils dancing across both lanes like they've got somewhere to be. I've been out here 25 years. My name's Elias, but most folks on the radio call me Smoke. Long story. I run a blue Cascadia, 53-foot dry van, mostly general freight between Albuquerque and the coast. Salt Vale Canyon is on one of my regular routes. I know every mile marker, every pull-off, every rattling sign. That night, the forecast said wind. High gusts after midnight, blowing dust, low visibility, same as always. What we got instead was nothing. The air was dead still when I rolled toward the canyon. Not just calm, still. My windshield was clean. No sand skittering along the asphalt. The scrub on the sides of the road stood perfectly still, like plastic plants in a showroom. Even the sky felt muted, stars smudged behind a thin film of cloud. I checked the clock. 1:17 a.m. I should have been tired, but I wasn't. I'd grabbed a nap at a truck stop outside Grant's. Strong coffee in the thermos beside me. The cab smelled like coffee, old leather, and that faint metallic note you get from the heater on low. The steering wheel vibrated in its usual way, a steady hum running up through my hands from the tires. On the CB, the channel was quiet, just a soft wash of static and, every so often, a distant voice too faint to make out. Night traffic was light. A pair of headlights behind me dropped off a while back, more interested in the main highway than the canyon shortcut. Saltvale's gonna be a cakewalk tonight, I said to myself, tapping the wheel. I dropped into the canyon just after 1:30. There's a sign, white, peeling, half shot up, that says Saltvale Canyon, watch for high winds. Somebody once spray painted and other things underneath, and the state never bothered to clean it. As I passed it, my ears popped. It was subtle, like a quick change in pressure, a little click deep in my head. I swallowed, cleared my throat, flexed my jaw. It went away, but the air in the cab felt thicker afterwards. Cooler too. The digital readout said 68, but the air had that cold, metallic edge, like stepping into a walk-in freezer that hadn't fully cooled yet. The canyon walls rose up around me, swallowing the horizon. My headlights painted long, pale stripes ahead, catching layers of rock with each turn. The road was dry, no dust cloud, no wind pushing at the trailer, just empty asphalt and stone. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Saltvale never stays this still. I turned the radio down a notch, listening for the familiar whine of wind through the door seals. Nothing, just the low rumble of the engine, the faint hiss of the vents, the occasional creak of cargo settling in the trailer. I rolled my shoulders, told myself to enjoy the easy run for once. A couple miles in, I caught movement in my passenger side mirror. It was small, a little flicker of gray along the shoulder. I thought it was a tumbleweed at first, maybe a plastic bag caught on something. I glanced over, expecting to see some piece of trash dancing along the side of the road. The scrub and rock were still as a photograph, but the dust wasn't. A thin film of it lay over the shoulder like it always does out here. Only now it was lifting in small focused plumes, not blowing away, not drifting, rising in tight, defined shapes that puffed up, hung for a second, then fell only to rise again a few feet farther along. Footsteps, that's what it looked like. Dust lifting in perfect footprints, each one appearing beside my truck as I moved forward, the pattern pacing me. I let off the accelerator a touch, more out of instinct than intention. The wheel felt suddenly slick in my hands, sweat blooming under my palms. Probably air from the trailer, I muttered. Pressure change, something like that. Airflow. Nothing. Saltvale's famous for odd gusts. Air hits the canyon walls wrong and does strange things. I've seen dust devils pop up out of nowhere, whirl around like they were chasing the truck, then vanish. This wasn't that. These plumes were too neat, too regular. One, then another, each spaced just right. If you'd taken a human stride, scaled it up a little, and drawn it into the dust. That's what it looked like. I checked my mirrors again. The pattern stayed with me, match for match. When I sped up, the footprints appeared faster. When I eased off, they slowed. My skin crawled. Anyone else running Saltvale right now? I asked into the mic, my thumb pressing the button a little harder than necessary. This is smoke. I got some weird dust behavior on the eastbound lane. Might be a truck ahead kicking things up. Silence. The CB answered with a low hiss. For a moment, under the static, I thought I heard something that wasn't an engine or a voice or anything I knew. A sort of drawn-out sigh, too long to be a breath. Then it faded. The dust kept walking. Eventually, it moved closer. What had been along the shoulder crept inward, toward the painted line. Plumes rose right beside the truck now, hugging the lane. I could see them in the peripheral of my headlights, little bursts of sand leaping up and falling away, as if invisible feet were stepping out of nothing. My heart rate ticked up. I forced myself to breathe slow, steady. One hand left the wheel long enough to check the window. It was sealed tight. No hiss of air. No breeze sneaking in. I told myself it was vortices from the trailer passing. Some weird airflow hugging the canyon floor. Old road, strange angles. Physics. Then the steps started to run. The plumes became more frequent, closer together. The pattern tightened. It wasn't a walking rhythm anymore, it was a sprint. Dust leaping in quick succession beside me, slightly ahead now, like whatever was making those marks had decided it was time to pass. The engine's vibration faded for a second, the wheel going weirdly light in my hands before the hum returned. Goosebumps crawled up my arms under my flannel, the hair on the back of my neck standing up like I just stepped under bad fluorescent lighting. Easy, I told the truck. Or myself. Maybe both. Up ahead, the canyon bent left, the rock folding over in a high curve I knew well. I took it at a safe speed, eyes jumping between the road and that line of impossible footprints. Right as I came out of the bend, the dust figure made its move. It leaped. One moment, the footprints were beside my right fender. The next, a surge of dust erupted directly in front of the truck, in the center of my lane. It didn't just billow, it formed. My headlights hit it full on. The dust gathered into a tall, thin outline, human-shaped at first glance, but wrong in the details. Too long in the arms, shoulders too narrow, legs stretched like someone had dragged a normal figure out on a screen. There was no face, just hollows. Except in those hollows, for a split second, something reflective glinted back at me, like headlights hitting the back of a chrome hubcap buried way back in a tunnel. I froze. My foot hovered over the brake, every instinct screaming to slam it. But some old training kept me from doing anything that would flip 40,000 pounds of freight on a canyon curve. The dust figure paced me without moving its legs. It stayed in front of the truck, maybe 10 feet off the bumper, tall and impossibly steady. The grains of sand that made it up shimmered and danced, but the shape held. As I rolled forward, it rolled backward, keeping the distance perfect, like we were pinned together on some invisible rod. The cab filled with sound that wasn't engine noise. It was the hiss of dust hitting metal, multiplied by 100. A dry rush, like 1,000 hands dragging over the hood at once. Underneath that, barely audible, came a noise I can only describe as strained. Not a scream, not from a human throat anyway. More like the canyon itself trying to exhale through too tight lungs. The smell changed too. Ozone, sharp and electric. Burnt rubber like hot tires on rough asphalt. The scent of rain on sand, but no rain fell. Just that dry, metallic cold creeping into my nose and mouth. Get out of the road, I whispered. To dust, to air, to whatever was wearing it. The figure tilted its head. That stupid little motion broke something in me. I tapped the brakes, just enough to drop my speed, my grip white-knuckled on the wheel. As I slowed, the dust walker surged closer. Its edges frayed, dust swirling off it in little tendrils. But the core held, that tall, thin outline humming with some quiet anger. Then, all at once, it broke apart. The shape dissolved, dust tearing free as if someone had cut a string. It spiraled upward in a tight, screaming column, the sound ratcheting up in pitch until it hit a frequency that made my teeth ache. The cloud stretched higher and higher, thinning against the canyon walls like it was being pulled back into something I couldn't see. Then it was gone. The road ahead was just road again. Empty. My headlights showed nothing but asphalt and rock. The wind came back in a single gust that rocked the trailer. Sand blasted the side of the cab, hissing against the paint. Scrub bent and whipped in the sudden fury. My steering wheel shuddered with the push, every sensation snapping back to the normal kind of bad Saltvale is known for. I drove the rest of the canyon in a daze. By the time I reached open desert, my hands had stopped shaking, but my mind hadn't. I told myself I'd hit some kind of rare gust pattern. A thermal burst, dust lifting in weird shapes, ice-tired, brain filling in the rest. Morning found me at a little truck stop off the interstate, the kind with 3 pumps and a diner that smells like burnt coffee and fried everything. Sunlight made the world small and manageable again. Trucks lined up, people moving, the ordinary grind. I walked back to check my trailer before I crashed in the bunk. Habit. Tires, doors, seals. When I ran my hand along the driver's side door seam, my fingers caught on something. Dust, not on the outside, packed into the seam from the inside. I frowned and opened the door. Fine, pale dust spilled out in a thin line, as if it had been crammed into every crack and was waiting for a reason to fall free. I checked the passenger door. Same thing. Dust packed deep into the rubber seals. I opened the glove compartment. Dust. Popped the panel off one of the vents. Dust, fine as flour, like it had been poured in there by hand. The outside of the truck? Clean. The inside? Like the canyon had breathed itself into my cab and decided to stay. I scooped some up between my fingers. It was cool to the touch, almost damp, even though the air was dry. When I rubbed it between my thumb and forefinger, it made a faint, dry hiss, like it was only pretending to be lifeless. I vacuumed it out, wiped down every surface, told myself it was just the canyon, just years of dust finally shaken loose by a rough run. But I know my truck. I live in this thing. That dust wasn't there before Saltvale that night. I still run that canyon. You don't get to pick your fears in this line of work. You just decide whether you're going to drive through them or park and let someone else take your load. Most nights, Saltvale is just what it's always been. A strip of road with bad wind and worse visibility. But every once in a while, the air goes still right where the warning sign is, and my ears pop, and the dust along the shoulder lies just a little too flat. Those nights, I keep one eye on the mirrors, watching for footprints that don't belong to anything with weight. And when the wind finally hits, when it slams into the side of my truck and screams past the windows, part of me wonders if it's just weather, or if something out there is still trying to find its way back into the shape it wore in my headlights. I say men because they were built like men, but they did not look like anyone alive. Their clothing was from another time. Layered robes, long coats, turbans wound in styles you only see in paintings or museum glass now. Fabric stiff with age, edges frayed into threads that never quite blew in the non-existent wind. Their faces, I caught them in small, horrible glimpses as they drifted through my headlights. Cheeks pulled tight against bone. Skin like leather left too long in the sun, then dried in cold. Lips shrunk back, exposing blackened teeth. Some had holes where flesh should have covered, an empty socket, a slice in the cheek showing molars beneath. Their eyes sat deep in their skulls, some so far back that only black shadow showed where the pupil should be. And yet they moved. They gripped ropes, they leaned into the weight of the cart. They shifted their feet in the steps of men used to long miles. The bells on the camels tolled softly, a broken rhythm. None of them looked at me. They passed through the beam like a memory too old to care about the present. The last of them dragged something behind him. First, I thought it was another bundle. Then the fog thinned just enough for my lights to catch skin. It was a shape as long as a man, wrapped in thin cloth that had once maybe been white. The fabric clung to the form beneath, sinking into hollows, stretching over protrusions. At the head end, the cloth was torn. A dried, gray face protruded, jaw unhinged, hanging slightly open. No eyes, just holes. The skull beneath showed through in places, cheekbone bare. A rope dug into its ankles, the body leaving no mark on the road I could see, making no sound I could hear. The line of camels and men kept moving across. I don't know how long I sat there, watching. Time in fog stretches. It might have been 30 seconds. Felt like hours. Then one of them turned. He was walking at the rear, next to the dragged body. His robe was heavier than the others, bordered in a pattern my eyes couldn't fully make out. In my headlights, his profile was all sharp bone and shadow. Without changing pace, he turned his head toward my cab. The movement was slow, like stiffness had grown into his neck over centuries, and he was forcing it aside just this once. His face came into full view, directly in front of my truck. The skin had dried and cracked in a spiderweb pattern, dark lines radiating from his eyes, mouth, and nose. The nose itself was mostly gone, caved in. His lips hung in tatters, teeth exposed. The lower jaw sagged, not fully attached on one side. It moved slightly with each step, loose, like a door hanging on one hinge. Yet I heard him, not with my ears exactly, not over the engine or through glass. It was like the word formed inside the fog between us, clear and weak at the same time. Wrong path. His jaw didn't move in any way that should have made sound. The words came out as a whisper woven through the bell chimes and creaking wood. My heart slammed against my ribs. My hands tightened on the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. He kept looking as he passed the center of my beam, then turned his head forward again, as if satisfied he'd been understood. The line continued, vanishing into the fog on the right side of the road, silhouettes disappearing one by one. The bells faded. The creaking of the cart dissolved into the thick air. For a few seconds, the fog glowed in my lights with no shapes at all. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, it thinned. Not all at once, in layers. First I saw the hood of my truck again, wet with condensation, beads of moisture trembling on the metal. Then the road ahead, a strip of dark asphalt with pale edges. The rock wall to the right sharpened. The drop to the left reappeared, its snow-covered ledges catching moonlight. Within a minute, visibility went from 10 meters to 50, then 100. The night returned to normal. No caravan, no camels, no robed figures. My engine hummed like it always did. The CB hissed. The heater blew lukewarm air at my feet. If it weren't for my pulse still hammering and the slickness of my palms on the steering wheel, I could have convinced myself that I'd fallen asleep for a few seconds and dreamed it with my eyes open. Then I saw the track. Crossing the road about 10 meters ahead, cutting from the left side toward the drop on the right, was a single, clear line in the snow. Not fresh snow, just the thin dusting that had remained in the lee of the rock where the plows hadn't thrown it away completely. A wheel track, too narrow to be from a modern vehicle. The impression was deep in the center, shallow at the edges, like weight had pushed down on a relatively thin rim. You see something similar on old village bullock carts, but those leaf scuffs, skid marks, scattered straw. This stood alone, clean, unbroken. The pattern in it was wrong for anything we use now. The metal rim had left faint, repeating ridges, not the radial pattern of a rubber tire. The gap between the twin grooves was narrower than any axle we run on this route today. It cut across the road at the precise angle the cart had taken through my beams. The snow around it on either side was untouched. If another truck had driven that path, there'd be tracks. If a real cart had somehow climbed up here, I'd have seen hoof marks, slipper prints. There was nothing, just that single ancient feeling will mark, pressed into the present like a stamp. I sat there shaking for a full minute, engine idling, fog remnants drifting away in thin wisps. Then I did what drivers do. I put the truck in gear, eased over the track as if it were a fragile step between worlds, and kept driving. At the next checkpost, the guard on duty took one look at my face and asked, "Thick ho, driver?" "Fog the Youper," I said. "Buera the..." He nodded, sympathetic in that automatic way. "Legend Walla area high," he said, half joking. "Purain Saudagar. Sunahai?" "Es Sunahai the," I replied. "Abdek be Leah." He laughed, but then he saw I wasn't laughing with him. The smile faded from his eyes. We didn't talk about it more. You can go up there yourself in winter on a foggy night. You might drive that stretch 100 times and see nothing but rock, snow, and your own nerves. But if the mist ever rises fast and your own hood disappears, and you hear bells where there should be none, remember what he said. Wrong path. Some roads don't belong to us, even if we've laid the asphalt on top. And sometimes, when the old ones pass through, they're not warning you for their sake. They're warning you because in their time, no one ever came back from the turn you're about to take. They say you see a lot of things in canyons at dusk if you don't get enough sleep. I used to believe that. Name's Hart. I've been running freight in the Southwest for just over 28 years. Mostly reefer these days, pulling a 53-foot box behind a worn but loyal Peterbilt 379. That particular night, I was hauling produce out of Yuma, aiming to clear Falter Canyon and hit the interstate before full dark. Falter's one of those places drivers talk about, but never quite in a straight line. You hear more about loose rock and tight turns than anything else, but every now and then a guy will trail off mid-sentence and say something like, "Just don't stop in the canyon, you'll be fine." I never put much stock in that kind of talk. A canyon is rock, road, and bad engineering. That's it. The sky was slipping from orange to that flat blue that barely counts as daylight when I turned toward Falter. Long shadows lay across the two-lane blacktop. My dash clock reads 7:42 p.m. The air conditioning hummed quietly, pushing out cool, dry air with that faint metallic smell old vents get. The steering wheel vibrated in a familiar way under my hands, engine rumbling steady. Weather was good, clear, no rain, no wind worth mentioning. You could smell dust and hot stone, that baked smell that hangs over the desert even after the sun's almost gone. On the CB, the channel was mostly dead. A couple guys far off talking about fuel prices, then fading out. I was wide awake. No pills, no energy shots, just routine. The entrance to Falter Canyon isn't much. Just a narrow cut where the rock on either side rises up and squeezes the sky into a strip. A sign warns about falling rocks and advised speeds, but no one's bothered to repaint it in a decade. I eased the peat down a gear as the road began to twist. The canyon walls caught the last of the light, glowing rusty red and shadow. My headlights washed out the details, leaving the rocks flat and pale in front of me. About half a mile in, I saw her. She was up on a high ledge on the right side, maybe 30 feet up, where the wall jutted out like a shelf. A little girl, 10, maybe 11, sitting with her legs dangling over the edge, swinging them back and forth like she'd been waiting for a bus that never came. Dark hair, light-colored dress, too light for the dust and rock around her. No backpack, no parents, no path up to where she was sitting that I could see. Just a kid where no kid should be. I frowned, instinctively easing off the throttle. "What the hell are you doing up there?" I muttered to myself. As I drew closer, she turned her head and looked down at me. Her eyes caught my headlights, but they didn't reflect like normal eyes do. They didn't glow red, or blue, or even shine wet. They were just gray. A flat, dull gray that seemed to drink in the light instead of bouncing it back. Like I was staring into two small concrete discs set into her face. The wheel felt slick in my palms all of a sudden. I gripped it harder, drove under the ledge, and lost sight of her as the rock above blocked my view. "Must be a house nearby," I said out loud, like talking could sand down the edges of how wrong it felt. "Some ranch kid. Maybe there's a path I can't see from here." I checked the mirror once I passed. The ledge was empty. No girl. No movement. Just rock and shadow. My stomach did a slow, heavy turn, but I forced my eyes back to the road. Canyon driving is not the place to let your imagination take the wheel. A mile or so later, the canyon narrowed. The walls pinched in closer, the sky above thinning to a strip of deepening blue. My headlights pushed back against the dark, catching old blast marks and cracks in the stone. That's when I saw her again. Another ledge, this one on the left side, higher up and farther ahead. Same little body, same light dress, same bare legs swinging over the drop like there was nothing dangerous about the whole setup. She was facing away from me at first. Then, as if feeling the heat of the headlights on her back, she twisted around and looked down. Same gray eyes, same empty, dull look. No curiosity, no fear, just awareness, like she wasn't surprised to see me twice. My mouth went dry. "There's no way," I whispered. "No way you got there that fast." I hadn't passed any side roads, any trails, any vehicles pulled off. The canyon walls here were nearly vertical, all broken rock and scrub. No switchbacks, no hidden staircases. I clicked the CB, just to hear another voice. "This is Hart, eastbound through Falter," I said, keeping my tone level. "Anyone else in the canyon right now? You got a girl up on the rock near you. Little kid. White dress." Static answered, crackled in my speakers like dry leaves under boots. For a split second, I could have sworn I heard the faintest sound of humming. A high, tuneless little hum, like a bored child would make in the back seat. Then it dissolved back into noise. I passed under her again, this time fighting the urge to crane my neck and look straight up. The air in the cab felt colder now, despite the thermostat staying where it always did. Goosebumps prickled along my arms under my shirt, and the wheel's vibration felt thin, like there was less road under me than there used to be. The canyon tightened even more as I approached the tunnel. Tunnel is generous. It's more of a carved passage where they cut straight through a bend instead of wrapping the highway around it. The ceiling's low, the walls close. You hit your high beams going in just to feel like you have some kind of control, even though it doesn't do a damn thing. As the dark mouth of it came into view, My headlights caught movement at the entrance. She was standing there, not up high this time, not off to the side. Dead center in the lane, a small, motionless figure with her arms hanging at her sides and her head tilted slightly to one side, like she was trying to figure something out. For a moment I thought she was a post or a sign or some kind of optical illusion. Something about her edges didn't sit right, fuzzy at first, like heat shimmer. Then I saw the dress, the hair, the small, bare feet planted on the faded centerline. I did the math in my head in one quick, panicked burst. Speed, distance, stopping power with a full load, and knew there was no safe way to slam the brakes without risking a jackknife or losing control. "Move," I said, louder than I meant to. "Get out of the way. Move." She didn't. Her gray eyes caught the headlights, dull and flat. No blinking, no flinch. The tunnel swallowed my view of the sky, leaving only the girl and the road and the rock. I blinked. She wasn't there anymore. In that same instant, the trailer jerked behind me, just a small tug, like something had grabbed it for half a second and let go. The steering wheel went light, almost weightless, before the vibration snapped back like a rubber band. My heart hammered so loud I could feel it in my throat. I shot a look into my side mirror out of pure reflex. She was behind the truck. In the wash of my own taillights, I saw her, perched on the tiny sliver of bumper, impossibly balanced as the whole rig roared through the tunnel. Both her hands were pressed flat against the metal of the trailer doors. Her head was turned to the side, watching the wall of the tunnel slide past, her gray eyes just slivers in the red glow. Her hair didn't move, not from speed, not from air, not from anything. I dragged my eyes back to the road before I put the whole rig into the rock. The tunnel wall rushed past, concrete and stone smeared by speed and bad lighting. The sound in the cab changed. Under the engine, under the road noise, I heard a faint scraping from behind me, not at the tires, higher, at the doors. A soft, steady drag, like small fingers sliding through ash. It continued until the tunnel spit me back into open canyon and sky. Then it stopped. When I finally hit a pullout big enough for a long rig, I took it. My hands felt numb. My chest hurt from how tight I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. The truck idled in the fading light. The world felt weirdly normal again. Cicadas buzzing somewhere in the scrub. A stray gust of wind nudging dust across the asphalt. I climbed down, my boots hitting the ground a little unsteady. The air outside smelled like hot rubber and cooling brakes, mixed with that sharp metallic tang that reminded me of old coins on my tongue. I walked to the back of the trailer. The steel doors were coated in a thin layer of canyon dust. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual were the handprints. 2 small hands, planted side by side at child height. Not smears, not random patches. Clear prints, palms, fingers, the suggestion of tiny knuckles, stamped in ash-colored dust. The color was wrong too, darker than the rest, like it had been packed on from inside the metal somehow. I reached out and touched one. The dust under my fingertip was cool, colder than the air. It didn't smudge right either. It clumped and held its shape, like it didn't want to be disturbed. I wiped at it harder. The edges blurred a little, but the shape stayed. The print didn't disappear. It just sank deeper into the dull film on the metal, like it was burned there without heat. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, in full sun at a busy truck stop, I tried again with proper cleaner, rags, even a stiff brush. I scrubbed until my shoulder ached. The tiny, ash-colored handprints stayed. They stayed the next day, and the next, even after I hit Rain Cross State, even after I ran through a wash bay and watched high-pressure water strip the grime off every other inch of the trailer. Those prints clung stubbornly to the metal. It took 3 days for them to finally fade, not really washing away so much as sinking into the steel, becoming part of the stain and scratch pattern you stop noticing until you're looking for it. I still drive through Falter Canyon. Not every week, but often enough. Enough that I know where that first ledge is, where the second should be, where the tunnel waits. In daylight, it's just rock, just a route, just another way to get from one side of nowhere to the other. But when I hit it around dusk, when the light goes soft and the shadows stretch long, and I see even a hint of movement up on the overhangs, my hand drifts to the mirror without me thinking about it. And every time I step out to check my trailer after a canyon run, there's a moment, just a heartbeat, where I hesitate before I walk to the back, half expecting to find two small gray handprints waiting for me like she's still there, still hanging on, still trying to climb inside. They put signs all over Black Canyon to remind you it kills people. Steep grade, next 7 miles. Check brakes. Use low gear. Last runaway ramp for 3 miles. Doesn't matter how many times you run that stretch. The first time you tip over the edge and feel your rig start down, your stomach drops the same way it did the first day you pulled a loaded trailer. Name's Dale. I've been driving 40-foot plus since before half the kids out here were born. These days I run a Cascadia with a full sleeper 91-inch, pulling a 53-foot dry van. Mostly I haul paper and packaging out of Denver down toward the desert, Albuquerque, Phoenix, sometimes further. Black Canyon is the part of the route you respect, where you don't run it long. This was a late run, winter but dry. No snow, no ice, just that high desert cold that sneaks up on you when the sun drops. I'd left Denver behind schedule thanks to some yard mix-up, which meant I was hitting the canyon later than I liked. It was just after 11:30 p.m. when I rolled up to the first warning sign. The sky was clear, stars sharp and hard, a thin moon hanging over the distant ridgeline. The road surface was clean. No visible black ice, no blowing snow. If you looked only at the asphalt, you'd think it was a good night. The thermometer on the dash said 27 degrees Fahrenheit. The air in the cab smelled like stale coffee, truck stop fries, and that faint rubber chemical blend that seeps out of old plastics when you keep the vents on warm for too long. I took a sip from my thermos, set it back in the holder, and keyed the CB. Black Canyon eastbound. This is roadman dropping in, I said. Loaded, about 75,000 gross. Anyone else on the downgrade? A crackle of static, then a voice came back, a little fuzzy with distance. Copy that, roadman. This is Blue Jay, already halfway down. Watch the second mile. They got a chunk of pavement buckled on the right lane. Appreciate it, I said. You run in Jake's or ride in the pedal? Jake's all the way, brother. Don't cook your shoes in there. The channel went quiet again. I glanced at the sign rolling by my right. Trucks, 25 miles per hour, use low gear. I downshifted before the grade really began. Let the engine RPM climb into that sweet spot where the Jake brake does the heavy lifting. The hum under my feet deepened into a throaty vibration. Steady, controlled. The truck started down. You feel Black Canyon in your bones. The gradient isn't insane, but it holds. You're always a little too heavy, always aware of gravity waiting for one mistake. The canyon walls rise up in jagged black on either side, swallowing sound, reflecting it back wrong. Your headlights reach out and find guardrails, yellow signs, and glimpses of nothing on the other side of the drop. I'd run it enough times that the routine settled in quick. Eyes on speed, 27, then 25, then 23. Foot resting near the pedal but not on it. Engine brake rattling the silence in its familiar staccato. For the first mile or so, everything was normal. Then I heard them. Far below, so faint at first I thought it was my imagination, brakes. Screaming. If you've ever heard a rig lose its brakes, you know the sound. It's the drawn-out squeal of overheated drums and pads. A metallic shriek that goes on a second too long, then jumps up in pitch as panic hits the pedal again. That's what it sounded like. Distant, echoing up from the black cut of the canyon, bouncing off the rock. I instinctively checked my speed. 24. Engine RPM solid, air pressure good. My foot wasn't anywhere near the service brake. I turned the CB down and listened. The shriek came again, a little louder, rising up from somewhere off to the right where the canyon drops away hardest. Mixed in with it, for half a second, I thought I heard the loose rattle of chains snapping taut. That hollow, gut-dropping clink when something heavy comes free. I swallowed, throat dry. Someone's having a bad night, I muttered, trying to keep my voice casual, even alone. Maybe Blue Jay found that buckled pavement the hard way. I hit the mic. Blue Jay, you still with me? You got a runaway ahead of you. No response. The channel hissed softly. the white noise somehow colder than the air around me. My breath fogged a little against the side window, even though the heater was holding steady. Speed, 23. Everything under me felt fine. The steering wheel buzzed with normal feedback. The trailer tugged in the usual, predictable way. The canyon walls seemed to press closer. Another half-mile down, the screaming brakes came again. Closer now, sharper, like someone was mashing the pedal full force over and over, squeezing the last bit of friction out of metal that had already given up. Then, for the first time, I heard my own truck join in. It started as a faint whine I felt more than heard. A vibration through the floorboards that didn't match the engine or the Jake. A higher tone, thin and scraping. It grew with each second. A shivering wail that crawled up through the steering column into my hands. I checked my gauges again. Air pressure normal. No warning lights. Speed holding. My foot was still off the brake. The truck disagreed. The sound grew louder, no longer faint. Brakes screaming, my brakes. Like I was stomping them downhill, except my leg was still hovering an inch above the pedal. The vibration in the wheel sharpened, losing that smooth engine brake hum and taking on a rough, tearing quality. "Don't you start?" I muttered, forcing myself to keep my touch light. "You're not hot. You're not fading. This is just the work talking." The smell came next. Burnt. That unmistakable scent of overheated pads and cooked rubber, rolling through the vents like someone had opened a door on a runaway ramp after a bad night. Underneath it, a hint of ozone, sharp and metallic, like air after a lightning strike. It didn't make sense. I wasn't using the brakes. I wasn't riding them. But the cab filled with it anyway, like the canyon had decided what I should be smelling and sent it up through the vents. I thumbed the CB again, voice tighter than I liked. "Any unit westbound or eastbound in Black Canyon? You got visuals on a rig smoking its brakes? I'm picking up some nasty echoes down here." Silence. Then, faint, buried in the static, a sound like metal bending. A long, low groan, as if steel itself was protesting a load it couldn't bear. The truck jerked. It wasn't much at first. A little sideways tug at the back end, like a crosswind gust had nudged the trailer. Problem was, there was no wind. The trees along the canyon rim were still as cardboard cutouts. Speed ticked up. 26, 27. I dropped another half gear, Jake rattling louder. It should have grabbed me, but the sensation of being pulled didn't change. Something unseen was tugging my trailer downhill. Not from behind, but from below, like weight had shifted into the canyon itself. The brakes screamed louder. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was almost a voice, a raw, metallic howl that seemed to wrap around the cab, vibrating in the glass and the thin metal skin. "Come on," I hissed through my teeth. "Work with me." The tug from below became a sharp yank. The trailer slid half a foot toward the shoulder, the wheel twitching in my hands as I corrected automatically. The guardrail on the right flashed in my peripheral vision, too close, cold and silver under the headlights. In that instant, right as I fought the rig back into line, the canyon walls answered with their own noise. A crash. Not ahead. Not to the side. Below. It rolled up from the black like thunder bottled under stone. The unmistakable symphony of a fully loaded rig losing the fight. Brakes failing, metal twisting, trailer jackknifing. Then the final, sickening crunch of impact somewhere deep down where no headlights reached. Except it wasn't now. Couldn't be. There were no lights ahead of me, no trucks behind, nothing on the CB, no dust cloud rising, no sparks, no debris, just the echo of a wreck that didn't exist in front of my eyes. My heart slammed against my ribs. The steering wheel buzzed in my hands, suddenly too light, like the tires were skating on something slick I couldn't see. For one terrible moment, I felt it, my trailer starting to go. Gravity grabbed the load and tugged. The whole rig leaned toward the drop, that slow, tipping sensation you don't forget once you've felt it, when 80,000 pounds decides it's done listening to your plans. The screaming brakes rose to a knife edge, a shriek so sharp it hurt my teeth. And then it changed. The sound thinned, stretched, and folded in on itself. Metal tearing turned into something smaller, tighter, like a voice forcing its way out of a throat it didn't belong in. Right inside the cab, wrapped up in the brake scream and the engine noise, I heard it. Not your turn. The whisper slithered through the static of the CB, through the hiss of the vents, right into my ear. Close, intimate, calm. Not yet. The pull vanished. Just like that, the weight dropped back onto the engine brake. The tug from below snapped like a cut cable. The trailer settled directly behind me, the sideways slide stopping so abruptly I felt my own muscles jerk in response. The smell of burning faded, dissipating as if someone had opened a door in the canyon and let it escape. The brakes went quiet, not the usual noise. They didn't ease back into normal, everyday sounds. They just stopped screaming. One moment I was wrapped in that metallic wail. The next I had nothing but engine hum, tire hiss, and my own breathing rattling in my ears. I didn't touch the pedal. I didn't change the gear. I didn't say a word. I drove, for the next hour, through the rest of the canyon, over the flats, past the runaway ramp with its bed of gravel, past the patched scars where other drivers hadn't been so lucky. I didn't slow down more than I had to, didn't pull over, didn't look in the mirrors any more than necessary. My hands stayed on the wheel at 10 and 2. My eyes flicked between the road and the gauges over and over, as if numbers on a dash could explain why I was still alive. Eventually, I reached a wide, safe turnout under open sky. I pulled in, set the brake, and just sat there listening to the ticking of cooling metal. When I finally stepped out, the air hit me like a slap. Cold, thin, much cleaner than what I'd been breathing in the canyon. I walked the rig, felt the drums. They were cool, cold even. No heat, no smoke, no sign they'd been anywhere near failure. I looked over the edge of the canyon, toward the darkness where the echoes had come from. Somewhere down there, past where the guardrails end and the rock starts, are skeletons of rigs that didn't make it. Everyone who runs Black Canyon knows that. You see the occasional twisted bumper down in the scrub when the light hits at the right angle. That night, I didn't see anything, just darkness, and the memory of a crash I heard but never saw. I still run that route. Habits and paychecks don't care much about your ghosts. But every time I roll up on the first warning sign and drop into low gear, I listen hard. Sometimes, when the wind dies just right and the canyon goes still, I hear distant brakes screaming where no truck is in sight. And buried somewhere in that noise, like a voice caught in old metal, I hear it again. Not your turn. Not yet. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. They didn't say anything for a second, but something passed between them. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. What? I asked. Some local dispatcher playing games? He shook his head once. That channel used to be monitored by a rescue driver based at Post 9, he said. He ran night patrols through here, pulled out stranded cars, warned about slides. 2 years ago, Big One came down during a storm. He nodded at the fresh rubble in front of us. Worse than this, took him and his Jeep with it. We dug 3 days before we found what we could. The wind lifted then, sending a soft drift of dust over the top of the slide. It hissed along the rock, a sound not unlike radio static. After that, they reassigned the frequency, the officer said. No one's supposed to be transmitting on it now. Not from our side. My eyes went to the CB. The little green LED glowed calmly. The channel indicator sat on the number he'd just mentioned. You're sure it was that band? He asked. I nodded. He let out a slow breath. You're not the first, he said, almost to himself. Last winter, one of our own trucks swore someone told them to stop right before a fall. Same phrasing, same channel. He closed the logbook with a soft snap. Officially, he said, voice returning to its normal tone, you saw some loose rocks and stopped. You were cautious. Good driver. That's what I'll write. Unofficially, I asked. He looked past me, out toward the slide, toward the dark slope above. Unofficially, he said. Maybe some people stay on their channel a little longer than their shift. They cleared the road by noon the next day. By then, the story had already grown a few extra details among the road crews. How big the rocks were, how close I'd been, how I'd felt something before the call. That's how rumors begin. The recording on my CB, though, that stayed the same. I played it later in a quiet corner of a dhaba, ear pressed close to the small speaker. Static, the distant hum of my engine. Then, faint, a strained whisper. Driver, slow. A pause. A sound like gravel grinding. The distant echo of falling stone. Slow down, right now. And after the roar of the slide, after my own shaky report, that last line. You're safe. If you listen hard, just under those words, you can hear something else. A rumble that might be another rockfall, or might be a voice that never stopped calling warnings in the dark. I've driven Night Ridge a dozen times since. I still keep the CB tuned to working channels, still rely on voices I can't see to tell me what's around the next bend. But every time I reach the first sign for the landslide zone, my thumb itches. All it would take is a tiny twist of the dial to land back on that old, retired frequency, to see if he's still out there, whispering into static, trying to keep drivers out of the space where his shift ended. I never do it, because that night he spoke first. And some part of me is convinced that if I ever call back to that dead channel, I won't like what answers. They tell you the past sticks to some places heavier than others. Highways get repaved, signs get replaced, but certain stretches, they remember. Greywater Canyon is one of those. On the map, it's just another cut through the rock on the way between bases and desert towns. But if you talk to anyone who's been around long enough, they'll mention the convoys. Not the modern ones, the old ones. Name's Archer. Most folks on the radio call me Arch. I drive a white Kenworth T680, pulling a 53-foot reefer. These days I haul mostly grocery and dry stock between El Paso and a couple of distribution centers heading north. Greywater Canyon's on my regular route when I'm trying to shave time and dodge some of the bigger grades. I've run that canyon since before my beard went gray. This particular night, I was coming eastbound out of a base-adjacent town. Reefer loaded with frozen goods that needed to be at a warehouse by sunrise. Dispatch had me on a tight clock, but that's not new. It was just after 2 a.m., that thin hour where the world feels hollowed out and most of the sane people are asleep. Weather was dry, clear sky, stars muted behind a thin haze. No wind to speak of. The temperature gauge on my dash read 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Cool but not biting. The cab smelled like old coffee, faint diesel, and that metallic cold scent from the vent system when it's been running on low all night. The engine hum came up through the floor, steady and comforting. The vibration in the steering wheel exactly what it should be. CB was quiet, just the background hiss of static and the occasional far-off voice, too faint to understand. I've taken Greywater 100 times. It's long and narrow, walls rising up on both sides in jagged gray stone, the kind that seems to drink in light instead of reflecting it. During the day, it's almost pretty. At night, it's a tunnel with delusions of grandeur. The entrance sign rolled past on my right. Greywater Canyon, next exit 21 miles. Someone had shot it up years back. Holes ringed the word Greywater like a disease. Right as I passed it, a little shiver went through the cab. Air pressure shifted, subtle but noticeable. My ears popped. The faint hum in the steering wheel dipped for half a second, like the tires weren't quite touching the ground, then came back. The vents pushed a breath of colder air, carrying a hint of something. Old metal, oil, that military motor pool smell you never quite forget once you've been near it. I rolled my shoulders, settled deeper into the seat, and told myself it was just the canyon microclimate. Air funnels, pressure changes. Nothing supernatural about thermodynamics. The first few miles were uneventful. Headlights up, painting the rock in a dead whitewash. Canyon floor fairly smooth, just the usual patched cracks and the occasional bump that shook the coffee in my cup holder. My eyes moved between the road, the gauges, and the mirrors, habit more than thought. Somewhere around mile marker 10, I saw them. Not straight on. Not in the forward view. In the mirror. At first it was just shapes. Faint outlines in the driver's side mirror, hanging back a couple hundred yards. It looked like a string of vehicles. Lights dim and ghosted, as if someone had washed out the contrast on real headlights. I frowned and leaned a little closer, but not enough to drift. The shapes stayed. boxy outlines. A series of low, squat vehicles, nothing like the trailers and tractors I'm used to. The lead one had a profile I recognized from old photos. A Jeep. Old style, from back when they actually called them that. Their headlights flickered, not in any pattern that made sense. One moment bright, the next dim, then bright again, like someone was spooling and unspooling film in front of a projector. I checked the road behind me directly, glancing over my shoulder through the side window. Nothing. Just empty canyon and the slice of asphalt cut through it. In the mirror, the convoy was still there, ghost dim, marching along like it was 1967 and I'd stumbled into the wrong decade. I let out a long breath. Eyes are tired, I told the empty cab. You've been driving too long. It's reflections off the rock. That's all. Headlights bouncing around, making patterns. I turned the CB up a hair. This is Arch eastbound in Greywater, I said. Any westbound units out there? You seeing some weird light behavior? Or do I just need more coffee? Static rolled back at me. No wisecracks. No bored late-night driver chiming in. Just the hiss with a faint, intermittent crackle underneath. It almost sounded like words, but not modern ones. Clipped syllables, that sharp, ordered tone you hear in old movies when someone's barking coordinates. I turned the volume down again. The next sign that something was off came from the road itself. There's a series of expansion joints around mile 12. Old repairs where the highway flexes a bit with temperature changes. You feel them as a gentle thump-thump under your tires, two in quick succession, then smooth again. I hit them, felt the familiar double bump. Coffee rippled in the cup. Truck settled. 10 seconds later, I felt them again. Same double bump, same pitch in the hum, same little sway in the trailer. I glanced at the odometer. I hadn't gone far enough to hit another set. I knew this road. There wasn't another paired joint that close. The rig rolled on top of invisible bumps a third time. The motion was identical, like someone was replaying the last 8 seconds of road under me while everything else moved forward. A weird chill walked down my spine. The hairs on my forearms lifted under my jacket. Greywater has a reputation for echoing sound. Maybe it was echoing motion too, my mind suggested half seriously. Like the canyon walls were playing back a tape of some earlier drive and overlaying it on mine. In the mirror, the convoy had crept closer. The Jeep was clearer now. Faded green body, no doors, windshield up. Two darker shapes in the front seats, helmets low. In the back, another figure, harder to make out. The headlights flickered like old projectors, sometimes washing right through my trailer as if it were nothing. Every time my real truck hit a small crack or rut, the image of the Jeep bounced too, like it was sharing the same road on a different reel. At 14 miles in, the canyon narrowed. The rock closed in on both sides, pressing the lane into a tighter corridor. My headlights shone further down now that they had closer stone to catch on, making the world ahead look like a long, pale throat. It was then that the Jeep moved up. Not physically, not in real space. It stayed behind me if I checked over my shoulder. But in the passenger side mirror, it drew level with my cab. One moment, it was a safe distance back, ghost lights bobbing. The next, it was pacing me, just off my right, where no shoulder existed, only rough, jagged rock and a drop that would ruin any vehicle. In the mirror, the Jeep's wheels rolled smoothly over that vertical cliff face like the ground was somewhere I couldn't see. The soldier in the back of the Jeep was clearer now. Helmet, shadows where eyes should be, a pale, grainy look to him, like someone had desaturated the world and smudged the lines just enough that you couldn't be sure what you were seeing. Then he turned his head. In the passenger side mirror, his gaze locked straight onto mine. Not at the truck, not at the road, at me. The distance between our two vehicles, between my cab and his impossible Jeep, didn't seem to matter. I looked quickly to the right, out the passenger window at the canyon wall. Stone. Darkness. No Jeep. No convoy. Just rough rock sweeping by a couple feet from my mirror. In the glass, the soldier kept staring. The hum in the steering wheel faltered again, just for a heartbeat. My palms went slick. I tightened my grip and forced my eyes back to the road, checking my speed, my lane position, anything that was still normal. The smell in the cab shifted. Diesel and coffee slid under a new note, old exhaust, that thick, oily tang from engines that predate emission standards by several lifetimes. Under it, something else. Musty canvas, sweat, metal warmed by desert sun long gone. The CB crackled to life on its own. Convoy 3, hold formation. The voice was thin, warbling with static, but the cadence was crisp. Military. The kind of clipped command you hear in archival tapes. Another voice cut through, overlapping it. Greywater Pass, ETO 320. Then everything warped. The words bent, stretched, like a tape reel slowing down, and bled into a low, steady hum before fading out entirely. I didn't touch the dial. Just resonance, I whispered. Old radio traffic bouncing around. Atmospheric skip, something like that. I didn't believe myself, and there was no one else in the cab to convince. The canyon's mile markers are small, green signs half swallowed by dust. I'd passed 15 and 16 without really seeing them. At that point, my whole world had shrunk to three things. The lane in front of me, the soldier's eyes in the mirror, and the sensation that every bump I hit had been hit before by someone else in exactly the same way. The road shook me again, another joint, another repeat. Thunk thunk, thunk thunk, like the ground was stuck on a loop. My GPS, mounted low on the dash, glitched. The little blue arrow stuttered, jumped backward a quarter mile, then slid forward again. The digital map flickered, briefly showing an older version of the route, thicker lines, different labels, before snapping back to normal. When mile marker 17 finally appeared in my headlights, it felt like passing a finish line. Exactly as my bumper drew level with it, the convoy vanished. Not faded, not peeled off onto some non-existent side road. One frame, they were there in the mirror, Jeep, trucks behind it, headlights flickering. The next frame, there was nothing. Empty canyon, empty road, but the soldier stayed. For another 30 seconds, his reflection remained fixed in my passenger side mirror. No Jeep around him now, no background, just his upper body, helmet low, shoulders squared, eyes locked on mine like he was sitting in a chair across from me. The road beside my truck was empty. I checked, double and triple. Nothing but rock and shadow. In the mirror, he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't fade. He just sat, stitched into the glass like an old image burned onto film, refusing to give up its place. My heartbeat had moved up into my throat. My hands felt numb on the wheel. It took every bit of discipline I had not to stomp the brakes or swerve away from something that wasn't there. I don't know what finally broke it. A bump in the road, a random gust of wind, or some internal timer in whatever was replaying itself through me. But at about 30 seconds past marker 17, his image flickered, just once, like a skipped frame, and then the mirror contained only what it should. The pale sweep of my trailer's side and the smear of darkness beyond. The smell of old exhaust slowly drifted away, replaced again by the ordinary sense of my cab. The steering wheel's vibration fell back into its normal rhythm. The CB returned to its harmless static. I drove another hour before I pulled over. Under bright fluorescent lights at a truck stop, I checked the mirrors with a flashlight, looking for anything. Smears, film, shapes in the glass. They were just mirrors. I wiped them down anyway, watched the cloth glide over clean surfaces. Greywater Canyon stayed behind me, just a darker patch in the memory of the road. I still run that way. Schedules don't stop because you heard something strange in the canyon walls. But every time I see that bullet-riddled sign for Greywater, part of me tightens. I don't look too long in the passenger side mirror between mile markers 10 and 17 anymore. Just quick glances, enough to stay safe, not enough to invite anything. And on some nights, when the CB picks up distant chatter that doesn't match any modern call signs, and I feel the same bump twice under my tires, I get the sense that I'm not the only driver Greywater is running on repeat. Somewhere between those miles, there's still a soldier in a faded Jeep, stuck in whatever loop that canyon caught him in, staring out through any mirror that's unlucky enough to line up with his route. I just hope I never catch his eyes for longer than 30 seconds again. They name some grades like a joke and some like a warning. Drowning Ridge was never a joke. On paper, it's just a stretch of highway in the mountains. 9% sustained for longer than anyone likes to admit, carved into the side of a canyon that drops away hard on one side and presses rock close on the other. You climb it or you don't. Simple as that. Name's Logan. Most folks on the radio call me Ledge. Long story. I run a red Peterbilt 389 with a 53-foot dry van behind it, mostly hauling paper and packaged goods between the coast and the inland distribution centers. Drowning Ridge Canyon sits on one of the shortcut routes dispatch loves and drivers tolerate. It's not the worst grade out there, but it's the kind that sticks in your memory. White cross or two on the side. Old scars in the rock where something big didn't quite make it. This run was nothing special on paper. Full load out of a warehouse complex. Headed east, delivery window tight but not insane. I hit the base of the ridge a little after 1 a.m., that hour when most of the world feels emptied out and the road belongs to you and a few other stubborn souls. Weather was clear. Stars overhead, thin moon dragging a pale line across the canyon rim. Air temp sat at 41 degrees Fahrenheit according to the dash. Dry, cold enough that the air coming in through the vents had that metallic, almost hospital-clean edge to it. Inside the cab, it smelled like coffee, diesel, and the faint rubber of worn floor mats. I toggled my Jake off. This was a climb, not a descent, and dropped into the gear I knew would hold me steady without cooking anything. The engine note deepened, that low, steady roar climbing up through the floor and into the steering wheel. Down at the base, just before the real grade starts, there's a big yellow sign. Truck's 9% grade next 6 miles. Check brakes. Check gears. Another, smaller one sits beneath it, older. Faded. Someone had spray-painted a date on it years back. 98, and a pair of initials. I'd heard the story. Old Freightliner, overloaded, stalled halfway up and rolled it. They say the driver never even keyed the radio before he went over. I don't know how much of that is truth and how much is truck stop exaggeration, but you think about it when you downshift at the base and commit to the climb. I keyed the CB, more out of habit than expectation. Eastbound rolling into Drowning Ridge, I said. Loaded heavy, about 78 gross. Anybody else working the uphill tonight? Just the hiss answered. Then a voice crackled in briefly from somewhere far off, talking to someone else. Wrong channel, wrong distance. Gone again. Guess not, I muttered. I started up. You feel a 9% grade in your bones. The engine has to work for it. The wheel vibrates a little sharper, not from the road but from the strain. Speed drops whether you want it to or not, and you learn to live with the slower climb. About half a mile in, I checked my mirrors out of habit. That's when I saw the headlights. They were at the far back of my driver's mirror. 2 white points, low and steady, tucked into the curve of the canyon where the road swung away. It looked like an old rig by the pattern of the lights, wider spread, a little lower than the newer aerodynamic noses. Old Freightliner style. Hard to tell at that distance, but that's what my brain filed it as. Nothing strange about that. Night hauls stack up on grades all the time. I watched the lights for a few seconds. They held their distance, neither gaining on me nor dropping back. Just there, steady, patient. I rolled my shoulders, focused on my RPM, let the truck pull. A couple of minutes later, I glanced again. Same headlights, same distance, same intensity, like they'd been painted onto the mirror. I tapped the CB. Unit behind me on Drowning Ridge eastbound. This is Ledge in the red peat. You want to pass when we get a chance? Or you good sitting back there? No answer. The channel stayed a soft, empty hiss. I thumbed it again. Freightliner behind me, you copy? Still nothing. I told myself it wasn't weird. Some guys don't run the radio. Some guys keep it off after hearing one too many idiots argue politics on Channel 19. Maybe he was on a company channel instead. The grade got steeper. I could feel it in the way my shoulders leaned, in the new pitch of the engine. The steering wheel's vibration went from a hum to a near buzz under my palms. Not bad, just more alive. My speed hovered around 32 miles per hour and refused to budge higher. The air in the cab cooled a little. I hadn't touched the climate controls. A faint draft slithered around my ankles, like cold air had pooled on the floor. The vents smelled like hot engine and something else. Burnt clutch, maybe. That bitter, burned lining scent you never want to associate with your own truck. Except my gauges were fine. Temperatures normal. No slippage, no weird jumps in RPM. I checked the mirror again. The Freightliner was still there. Exactly the same distance back. Same tiny angle of tilt as the road curved. Same intensity to the lights. Not brighter, not dimmer. Never flashing, never shifting. Like someone had cut a frame of film and stuck it to the glass. There was nothing. As the road curved slightly, the convoy matched it perfectly. No drift toward the edge, no correction, no brake tap. Like they weren't reading the road at all, just following a line painted in the air. Fog began to gather low over the asphalt. Thin at first, then thicker, swirling in my headlights. It seemed to cling more to the space where those trucks moved, hanging around their wheels, never quite touching my bumper. On the inside of my windshield, a faint mist started to form in the corners, despite the defroster. The cab suddenly felt smaller, the air heavy and tight, smelling faintly of cold metal and my own breath. The convoy began to slow, not all at once, as one. The gap between each truck remained exact, like someone was sliding a transparent model along a ruler. Up ahead, I knew there was a wide bend, a long, gentle curve where the road shifted around a rocky outcrop before straightening again toward the inspection area. There's an old guard post there, abandoned now, half buried in snow. The 5 trucks rolled into that bend and stopped. Just like that. No brake lights, no dipping of the front suspensions. One moment they were moving slowly, the next they were still. I eased off the throttle further, letting my rig crawl, foot hovering over the brake, eyes flicking between the convoy and the road markings. It would be suicide to get too close, supernatural or not. Even ghosts could block a lane hard enough to kill you if you believed in them with your eyes instead of your head. My lights washed over the rearmost truck completely now. The frost on its canvas gleamed hard and white. It looked thick, undisturbed, like the kind of buildup you saw on vehicles that had been parked for a long, long time in one spot. Except it was here in the middle of the road. Something moved, not outside, underneath the canvas. The tarp of the last truck bulged outward, just slightly, as if a large shape had shifted beneath it. The frost cracked in thin lines, white breaking over darker patches. The bulge subsided, then rose again, a little higher. It wasn't violent. It wasn't jerky. It was slow, like breathing. My heart thudded against my ribs, suddenly too loud in the cab. I could hear the air in my nose, the tiny click of my throat swallowing. In the second truck, the tarp twitched. A ripple ran from front to back, gentle and horribly deliberate. Frost shook loose along the top edge, sprinkling down in powder. Then the first truck's canvas lifted. Not fully, just enough. The bottom edge of the tarp, tied down with rope that should have been stiff from ice, rose by a few inches, then dropped back. Behind it, only darkness. No boots, no cargo, no glimpse of what was inside. Just a strip of pure black that swallowed my headlights as if they weren't there. One by one, the reaction moved up the line. On the third truck, the canvas shivered, then swelled outward like a chest filling with air. The fourth's tarp pulled tight around whatever it covered, then relaxed. The fifth, the lead truck, stayed still for a long moment, and then its entire canvas seemed to suck inward, like someone inside had dragged a hand along the roof from end to end. I realized then I'd stopped breathing. My fingers were numb on the steering wheel. The heater hummed pointlessly, the air it blew over my knuckles suddenly cool. On the CB, nothing. No voices, no static, just a low, constant hiss, like someone breathing right next to the microphone and never speaking. My truck had rolled to a crawl, maybe 10 kilometers an hour, keeping that gap between me and the rear convoy truck. Enough to see, too much to escape. Control, this is cargo unit. I have 5 vehicles stopped on the bend. I forced out. There. I searched for a word that didn't make me sound insane. Behaving strangely. There was no reply. The radio channel was open. I could see the transmit light when I pressed the mic. On release, nothing answered. Just the same low, steady hiss. Ahead, all 5 trucks were still now. Tarps settled. Frost clung. The fog thickened, rising from the road, coiling around their tires, licking up the sides. It never touched my front bumper. It stopped right at that invisible line of distance I'd been keeping, like it knew where it was supposed to end. Then, in one heartbeat, everything changed. No warning, no sound. All 5 trucks blinked out of existence. One moment, my headlights painted their shapes in perfect detail. The next, there was nothing. Not a fade, not a dissolve. It was like someone had cut that strip of reality away with a blade and replaced it with empty air. My beams shot forward suddenly, unblocked, stretching far down the road, showing clear asphalt, the faint line of the bend, the abandoned guard post, the wide emptiness of the valley beyond. I slammed the brake harder than I should have, trailer wobbling slightly before straightening out. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out everything for a second. Every instinct screamed collision, impact, skidding, but there was nothing to hit. The road ahead was untouched, not just dry of vehicles, pristine. No tire tracks in the thin layer of blown snow on the surface. Not mine, not theirs. The faint lines my own tires should have carved on approach were gone. Smoothed over like the wind had been waiting, ready with an eraser. I let the truck idle there, air brakes sighing, my breath ragged in the cabin. The CB remained a dead hiss. The heater hummed a useless tune. I forced myself to roll forward, slowly, as if driving closer would make some trick of the light reveal itself. As I passed the spot where the convoy had stopped, I leaned forward, scanning the road through the windshield. The snow on the shoulder lay undisturbed, soft ripples frozen in place. No grooves, no compressed sections. The middle of the lane where 5 multi-ton trucks should have rested was as smooth as a new road. Even their absence didn't leave a mark. I made it to the inspection station 20 minutes later. The compound was lit up like an island, white floodlights revealing hard angles of concrete, towers, and the black teeth of cameras mounted everywhere. I pulled into my assigned lane, went through the usual motions. Papers, cargo check, a flashlight in the cab, in my eyes across my license. When the officer asked if I'd seen anything unusual on the approach, his tone was rote, casual. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out that wasn't a lie. Road was quiet, I said. Just me. He nodded, stamped my papers, waved me through. It wasn't until I parked in the holding lot and killed the engine that I remembered my dashboard camera. I'd wired it in myself. A small, stubborn black box wedged under the rear view, recording every second I was on official roads. Insurance against blame games, a silent witness when memories disagreed. My hands shook as I pulled the SD card and slotted it into a cheap reader on my old laptop. I fast-forwarded through the earlier footage, checkpoint lights in Gilgit, the climbing curves, the sharp mouths of the tunnels. The image quality was grainy, colors washed out by sodium lamps and my own headlights, but it was steady, trustworthy. Then I reached the stretch before the inspection area. My truck rolled through the dark, beams cutting the road. The digital timestamp ticked toward 1:14 a.m. On screen, the 5 trucks appeared ahead, exactly as I'd seen them. No lights, no exhaust, just shapes sliding through the night. I scrubbed forward. The convoy slowed, stopped at the bend. Tarps bulged in strange, slow movements. The camera caught it all, even exaggerated it, the flickering pixels making the motions look more jerky, more wrong. My chest tightened. At least I wasn't crazy. At least something physical had been there. Then, frame by frame, I watched them vanish. One frame, 5 trucks, military green, tarps shifting. Next frame, empty road. The timestamp continued without a gap. No glitch, no skip time. 1 second there, next second gone. I swallowed, tongue dry, and rewound a few seconds before the disappearance, ready to play it through again. That's when I saw the first glitch. On the frame right before the trucks appeared, something was wrong with the left side of the image. My driver's window, usually just a strip of darkness reflecting interior LED glow, was pale. A distorted smear of light warped across it. I paused, advanced 1 frame. The smear resolved. It wasn't just glare. It was a hand. A pale, elongated hand gripping the edge of the window frame from the outside. Fingers too long, pressed into the glass so hard the skin flattened, leaving white trails in their shape. The wrist vanished into darkness, but the knuckles were sharp, bone-white, wrong. Next frame, it was gone. The angle was impossible. At that speed, on that road, nothing should have been able to reach up and grab my window like that. No one walking, no one standing. I scrubbed further. Every 20 or 30 frames, there it was again. Sometimes whole. Sometimes just the fingertips pressed against the glass. Sometimes smeared down like something had dragged its hand slowly downward as the truck moved. Once, for a single frame, the reflection of the glass caught more than skin. Between two fingers, in the faint reflection of the interior light, I saw something like an eye, not shaped right, too round, too empty, but it was looking inward, looking at me. Later, when I tried to show the footage to a tech at a roadside shop, the file corrupted. Just that section, just that night. The rest of the card was fine, clear, normal. That part, static and black. Audio hiss like someone breathing right up against the microphone, not saying a word. They say the cameras out there see everything. Mine saw something it shouldn't have. Now, when I head toward the border and the road opens into that long, empty approach, I keep one hand on the wheel and one finger under the dash, ready to kill the camera if I need to. Because some nights, just before the floodlights of the inspection station appear, the CB will fall silent in a way that's too complete. And in the distance, where the road curves around that abandoned post, I'll see the faint outline of 5 trucks, rolling in perfect formation, moving too smoothly. No lights, no sound, like they're not driving through the world, just through me. They tell you not to pick up hitchhikers in canyon country. Most drivers mean the living kind. Name's Roy. Been running long haul since before most of these kids could parallel park. I pull a white Cascadia with a 53-foot reefer, mostly groceries and frozen stock between the coast and the inland hubs. Moon Trail Canyon sits on one of the prettier routes, at least in daylight. It's got that postcard overlook everyone posts online. Wide view, deep drop, sky so big it almost feels fake. Pretty doesn't mean safe. This run was simple on paper. Full load of frozen goods headed east, drop by 6 a.m. I timed it so I'd hit Moon Trail around midnight, miss the tourist traffic, get the downgrade while I was still awake enough to respect it. Weather was good, cold but clear. Stars scattered overhead, the moon just a thin slice hanging low. Dash read 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The cab smelled like old coffee and that slightly metallic chill that comes from running the vents on low all night. Steering wheel vibration was normal. Soft hum of the engine under my hands. Reefer thrum coming through the floor. CB was mostly quiet. Couple of drivers arguing about fuel prices states away. Somebody singing off-key to himself and then cutting off. White noise after that. I climbed toward the overlook with the radio low, one hand on the bottom of the wheel, one resting near the shifter out of habit. The canyon walls were still far off here, just dark shapes at the edges of my headlights. Moon Trail is one of those canyons that sneaks up, flat enough, then suddenly you're staring into a cut in the world. You can see the overlook coming from a good mile out. Guardrail, parking area, that useless little bathroom building. At night, it sits empty most of the time. People with sense don't come stand on the edge of a canyon in the dark. That's why I noticed her. She was right at the rail by the overlook. Slim figure, dark coat, standing easy with her hands on the metal, like she was just taking in the view that wasn't there. Only thing that stood out was the red scarf. It was bright, too bright, deep red that caught my headlights and threw it back raw. It was whipping in the wind, long and restless, snapping around her shoulders like the air was trying to pull it away. I slowed a little, more from surprise than anything else. Midnight, middle of nowhere, no car in the pullout, no dome light in the bathroom. Just a woman standing there like she'd been planted in the concrete. As I got closer, she didn't turn, didn't look at me, just stared out over the drop, scarf lashing side to side, hair moving with it. I passed, glanced in the mirror. She was still at the rail, red streak of fabric thrashing in the dark. Probably got dropped off, I told myself. Boyfriend in a car behind, or some camper tucked into a side road. People do dumb stuff for photos. The climb continued past the overlook, road curling along the canyon rim in long, smooth bends. The wind had been up higher near the top, rattling the mirrors just a little, tugging at the trailer. A minute later, rounding the next big bend, I saw her again. This time she wasn't at the overlook. She was standing at the roadside, right shoulder. Same dark coat, same slim frame, same red scarf. It snapped and whipped in the air, streaming out behind her like someone had grabbed the end and was running, though she was perfectly still. I checked the mirrors, jaw tightening. I'd had a clear view of the shoulder behind me leaving the overlook. No lights, no side road, nowhere for a car to have passed me. No way she could have walked that distance in the time it took me to hit the next corner. Not at that grade, not in those shoes. I could see the pale strip of her ankles, dress shoes, or something that had no place in gravel and dust. "Okay," I said quietly, like I was talking to the dash. "You're tired. You saw someone once, and now you're seeing every reflector as a person." I rolled past her without changing speed. She didn't lift her arm, didn't step out, didn't hitch, just stood there at the edge of my high beams, scarf whipping so hard it looked like it should strangle her. The engine note dropped as the grade peaked. I knew the downgrade was coming soon. The steep part where the road leans into the canyon, and if you don't gear down, you learn why they call the runaway ramps gravel coffins. The wind eased. I felt it more than heard it. The buffeting on the trailer softened. The little rattles in the doors went quiet. Air outside shifted from an angry push to a gentle touch, then to almost nothing at all. The scarf, when I saw it the third time, didn't care. Next bend, there she was again. Closer. Right at the edge of my lane now, heels just off the white line. The red scarf was moving as wild as before, snapping and twisting around her like it belonged to some different weather system entirely. The trees weren't moving. The scrub on the rocks sat still. The flag on the little side access gate down the way hung limp. Only the scarf moved. I felt goosebumps creep up under my flannel, little pinpricks marching along my arms and across the back of my neck. The steering wheel felt slick in my grip. The cab's warm, stale air suddenly seemed thinner. Anyone else coming up on Moon Trail? I keyed the CB. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. Got a lady at the shoulder 3 bends past the overlook. Just a heads up. She's close to the lane. Static, soft, and even. Nobody near enough to answer. I hit the crest. Grade sign flashed in my lights. Truck 7% next 5 miles. Use low gear. I dropped the Cascadia into the gear I knew would hold. Flipped the Jake on. Felt the engine grab the weight behind me as the world tipped downward. Moon Trail Canyon opened on my left. A long dark throat dropping away into nothing. The guardrail sat like a cheap promise between my tires and a long fall. I focused on my speed, on my RPM, on the feel of the vibration coming up through the wheel. Anything but the shoulder. It didn't matter. Half a mile into the descent, on a stretch where the canyon wall let go of the right side and gave me maybe 8 inches of gravel beyond the white line, she appeared in my headlights, dead center in my lane. One moment, empty road. Next, she was standing there, facing me, hands at her sides, red scarf streaming sideways as if in a gale. My foot slammed the brake out of reflex before my brain caught up. The tires grabbed. ABS chattered under my boot. The nose dipped. The trailer shoved, then settled as the Jake and the brakes fought each other to keep 80,000 pounds from sliding. The woman didn't flinch. For a fraction of a second, she was perfectly lit. Pale face, hollow eyes, skin too smooth and colorless for someone standing in cold canyon air. The scarf wrapped once around her throat, tails whipping in ways that didn't match my motion or the wind or anything sane. Then she was gone. No impact, no thump under the wheels, no scream, just emptiness where she'd been and the sound of my own truck fighting friction and gravity. I brought the rig to a full stop. Not gently. The seatbelt dug into my shoulder, and everything in the dash rattled once and settled. For a long second, I just sat there, heart punching against my ribs, ears full of engine noise and my own breathing. "No one there," I said out loud. "You locked up for a shadow. Good job." In the mirror, the road behind me was a long, pale tunnel of headlight. The canyon wall on the right, guardrail on the left. Nothing else. Then I saw her. Not in front. Not beside. Directly behind my trailer. She was standing maybe 10 feet back from the doors, dead center in the beams of my taillights. Same dark coat. Same too pale face. The red scarf was lifting straight up this time, not sideways, as if something above her was pulling it, winding it around an invisible hand. The air in the cab felt suddenly heavy, like someone had opened the door to a freezer and forgotten to shut it. My breath came out in little white ghosts that vanished in the dim. I blinked. She was gone from behind the trailer. Something moved at the corner of my vision. I turned my head. Slow, like any faster and things might catch up with me the wrong way. She was inches from my driver's side window. Her face filled the glass. Too close, too pale. Eyes like dry wells, dark, not from color, but from emptiness. The scarf was wrapped tight around her neck now, no longer whipping, the fabric dug so deep into the skin it looked like it was the only thing holding her head up. Her hair didn't move. Her clothes didn't move. The scarf twitched, just a little, like something under it still worked at the knot. I couldn't hear her, but my ears filled with a strange sound anyway. The low howl of canyon wind that wasn't there. The thin whistle of air through teeth. A distant horn, long and falling, like a truck going over the edge and never hitting bottom. I didn't think. I floored it. The truck lurched forward, engine roaring as I let off the brake and leaned into the downgrade harder than I should have. The tires caught, grabbed, rolled. The trailer tugged back into line. The guardrail swung by on my left like the world was trying to yank it under my wheels. I didn't look at the window again. Didn't look in the mirrors. Didn't check the shoulder. I watched the lane, the speed, the RPM, and kept going until Moon Trail was nothing but a darker patch of memory behind me. When I finally pulled into a truck stop an hour later, under buzzing fluorescent lights and the weak safety of other rigs around me, I checked the side of the cab. No handprints, no smears, just a faint line of dust. The outline of the window where my breath had fogged and cleared. I told myself I'd had a long week. That canyon plays with depth. Shadows can look like people if you want them to. Red scarf? Could have been a stop sign, a reflector, a taillight way off where it shouldn't be. But here's the problem with stories you can explain away. They don't follow you. Hers did. I still run canyons. Moon Trail, Black Ridge, Coyote Jaw. Places where the road clings to the edge of the world and hopes nothing lets go. And every time, somewhere between rock and sky, somewhere in a bend where the shoulder gets too narrow and the drop gets too close, I catch it. A flicker of red. A scrap of fabric on a signpost that moves when the air is dead. A reflection in the mirror that vanishes when I turn my head. A smear of color at the edge of my high beams, standing too still to be cloth and too wrong to be nothing. I don't stop for hitchhikers anymore. Not in canyon country. Not anywhere the wind remembers how to pull things over the edge. Because even when I'm alone on the road, sometimes I get the feeling someone's still riding along beside me. And that somewhere out there, on some overlook with no cars and no lights, there's a woman with a red scarf waiting for another truck to come around the bend. They say sound does strange things in canyons. Most guys just mean the way your Jake brake bounces back at you, or how a horn can sound like it came from 10 places at once. Horseshoe Canyon takes that and twists it. It doesn't just echo your noise back. Sometimes it gives you something extra. Name's Brenner. Been out here just over 22 years. I run a blue Kenworth W900, long nose, pulling a 53-foot dry van. That night I was southbound, hauling mixed freight, pallets of hardware and boxed appliances, headed toward a regional hub outside Tucson. Dispatch had me on a tight but doable schedule. If I cleared Horseshoe by 3 a.m., I'd be good. I hit the northern mouth of the canyon just before 1:45 a.m. Weather was decent. Clear sky, stars muted by a thin haze. No moon worth mentioning. The dash read 50 degrees Fahrenheit, dropping a little as I eased into the rock. The cab smelled like old coffee, a hint of diesel on my clothes, and that faint metallic chill from the vents running low all night. Horseshoe Canyon isn't the steepest place I run, but it's tight, walls like jaws on both sides, 2 lanes with barely any shoulder, and curves that feel like they weren't designed so much as grudgingly allowed by the rock. Headlights don't reach far in there. They carve a pale tunnel and leave the rest of the world to the dark. The CB was quiet, just a soft hiss of static and the occasional faint suggestion of voices from other channels, way out of range. No chatter, no company, just me and the truck. Everything felt ordinary at first. Engine humming under my feet, the familiar vibration of rubber on patched asphalt coming up through the steering wheel. The trailer tugged in that steady, predictable way. My hands rested loose at 10 and 2, eyes sliding between the lane, the gauges, and the mirrors. About 5 miles in, I noticed the echo. Not the usual one. I know that sound. Your engine noise rolls out, bounces off the walls, comes back to you a fraction of a second later, thinner and more hollow. You get used to it. This was different. My engine note was there, same as ever. A deep, throaty rumble, steady in the low gears. But under it, like a shadow line under a bold one, there was another sound. Heavier. It had the same rhythm. If I nudged the throttle a little, my engine rose in pitch, and the other one did too, just a hair lower, like it was dragging more weight. When I rolled off, both dropped together. Perfectly synchronized. Except there was only one truck on that road. Mine. I checked the mirrors. Nothing behind me but the faint glow of my own marker lights bouncing off the rock. No headlights, no grill, no one riding my back bumper. I told myself it was just double reflection. Sound bouncing around in some weird interference pattern. Rock can do that. It made sense if I said it with enough confidence. The canyon narrowed. The walls leaned in, catching my high beams 20, 30 feet ahead and throwing that pale, flat light right back at me. The road curved in long, sweeping turns that squeezed your lane discipline tight. My engine's pulse came up through the floor with a little more insistence. The second rumble stayed with it like a bigger truck pacing me from somewhere just out of sight. Near mile marker 40, the air in the cab cooled. The vents still said 68. I hadn't touched the controls, but an edge slid into the air, sharp, metallic, the kind of cold that made the hairs on my arms lift under my jacket. I breathed in and caught a mix of smells that didn't belong to my night. Hot oil, overcooked brakes, that old grease motor pool reek you get from older rigs that haven't seen a modern emission system. I keyed the CB, half for distraction, half for confirmation. Southbound in Horseshoe, this is Brenner in the blue Ken. Anyone else running the canyon right now? Picking up some weird echo down here. Static. Then, buried thin in the hiss, I thought I caught a bass note. A deep engine tone that didn't match mine, too slow by a half beat. It rolled through the speakers and faded before my brain could decide if it was real. I passed mile marker 41. It was hanging crooked, half eaten by dirt, the numbers barely catching my lights. The second engine rumble was louder now, so close in pitch to mine that together they felt like a duet just slightly out of tune. The glass in the windows gave a faint buzz, like they were catching vibrations they weren't built for. Then I saw the headlights, not in front, not behind, inside the canyon wall. At first I thought my eyes were playing games. The rock on the left side, gray, striated, pocked with old blast marks, seemed to glow from within. A pair of lights formed deep inside it, hazy and unfocused, like someone had buried a truck in concrete and turned the beams on. They flickered, not like a bad bulb, but like something trying to push through. The glow brightened, taking on that familiar halogen white tint. And for a heartbeat I could see the suggestion of a grill around them, outlines half lost in stone. I blinked hard, jaw tight on the wheel. The rock was just rock again. Scored, dusty, dead. The second engine didn't go away. It grew. The vibration shifted from background noise to something more physical. Rattling the dash, making the change in my cup holder buzz, sending a faint tremor through the pedals under my boots. It felt like another rig had pulled up alongside me, hidden inside the walls, humming at the edge of visibility. Near marker 42, the canyon straightens out for a stretch. It's not long, but compared to the curves, it feels like a runway. You can see further ahead, the walls falling back just enough to give you a slice of sky and a deeper sense of the drop over the guardrail. I rolled into that straight and felt the temperature in my lane drop. It was instant. One moment, the cab was just cool. The next, the air around me turned refrigerator cold. My fingers prickled on the wheel, breath puffing faintly in front of my lips. The vents still insisted they were blowing warm. That's when the phantom rig appeared. It drifted up on my left, just beyond the guardrail, riding the canyon edge where no truck has any business being. Old cab-over model, square nose, paint stripped by time. Rust chewed at the corners and seams. The plates were missing. The spot where they should have been was just an empty rectangle of cleaner metal, like they'd been ripped off. It was big, heavier than me. I could feel it in the way the second rumble pressed at the cab, turning my truck's noise into a thin layer on top of something deeper. Kept perfect pace with me. In the forward view, there was nothing. My lane was empty, the way the canyon run always is in the middle of the night. But in the left window, in the side mirror, in every reflective surface, the phantom cab-over haunted my peripheral vision. It was there without being there, occupying a layer of reality just half a step off from mine. I risked a real look. The driver's seat was empty. The wheel turned in small, steady corrections all on its own, invisible hands keeping it centered just off the edge of the world. Through the windshield, I saw the suggestion of cracked glass, a spiderweb of old impact that never quite resolved. For half a second, the cab-over's headlights flared bright. The light washed across my hood, then passed through it like fog, leaving a ghost reflection on the chrome that faded too slow. My fingers dug into the wheel. Instinct said tap the brake, fall back, get away. Training said don't do anything sudden in a canyon with a fully loaded trailer. I chose not to choose. I held my speed, kept my lane. The CB popped. Shoe southbound. You copy, Keller? The name hit me harder than the voice. Keller had been gone 10 years. Rolled his cab over in this same canyon, hauling tankers. I'd run with him more than once back when I was green. The official reports say he took a curve too fast. The drivers say something else got under his wheels. I hadn't heard that name on the air in a long time. My thumb hovered over the mic. I didn't press it. Some part of me knew the answer wasn't meant for me. The phantom rig drifted closer. Not by much, just enough that my side glass buzzed. The vibration from that heavier engine rumble rising into a full-body hum. The canyon walls on both sides seemed to lean in, light flattening out. My headlights felt weaker, swallowed faster by rock. My lane went colder. The cold wasn't just temperature anymore. It was texture. The air thickened, pressing against my skin, making the hairs on my arms stand up even under my jacket. Every time the Phantom's non-existent tires hit a bump I couldn't see, my truck shook like it had hit it too. Then it swerved. It didn't jerk like a panicked driver. It moved like something was trying to merge into a lane that wasn't built for it, sliding toward me in a slow, inevitable line. The cab-over's empty windshield turned in my direction. For a moment, the reflection of my own headlights in that cracked glass looked like eyes. The space between our rigs shrank. On the dash, all the lights seemed to dim, except for the gauges right in front of me. The canyon outside my beams went darker than dark, the rock turning into a void where sound sank and didn't quite come back. My hands locked on the wheel. My foot hovered near the brake, every muscle in my leg screaming to slam it, my brain screaming back that if I did, the trailer might come around and join whatever layer that thing lived in. I blinked. The phantom rig was gone. No fade, no peel away. One frame, it was there, pressing ice into my lane. The next, there was nothing but the empty canyon and the guardrail, glinting weakly in my own lights. The second engine rumble vanished with it. The air warmed by degrees. The glass stopped buzzing. The world outside the forward view came back into being rock, scrub, the faint impression of the canyon's other side. My truck felt lighter, as if something had stopped pushing down on the frame. I didn't stop in the canyon. I kept going until I was clear of the walls, out under a sky that felt higher and less interested in what I was driving. When I finally pulled into a turnout, hands still tingling from how hard I'd been gripping the wheel, I walked back with a flashlight to check the tires, the trailer, anything that could explain what I'd felt. Everything on my rig looked normal. The road beside mine didn't, running parallel to my tracks in the left lane, but shifted just a little too wide, like a truck had been half on the asphalt and half on air, was another set of marks. Darker than the road. Not fresh rubber, not exactly. They looked baked in, as if something heavy had traced them over and over until the asphalt remembered. Duels. Old spacing, narrower than modern tandems. They ran for maybe 100 yards before fading, right at the point where the canyon started to curve again. I drove that stretch a week later, mid-afternoon, just to see. The marks were still there. Fainter, but visible, like scars on skin that you only notice when the light hits them sideways. Over the next month, they slowly disappeared, ground back into the general chaos of the road surface. But here's the thing. On some late runs, southbound through Horseshoe, I still feel that second rumble slip in under mine. Still hear, under my own engine note, the ghost of another rig trying to keep pace. When the canyon straightens at 42, I don't look too long at the rock, and I don't stare at the empty space beside me. Because whatever layer that old cab-over is trapped in, it doesn't seem content to stay alone. And every time the canyon throws my engine sound back at me just a little too deep, I wonder if it's waiting for another truck to drag into its groove.